My father was a tireless advocate for the law. He was a criminal prosecutor. Some say ruthless, others say righteous. Yeah, I'm cut from the same cloth. I can't really remember who I was before I became a cop. It's my job to make bad things happen to bad people.
It's like someone took my heart and tore it right out of my chest. Why has God forsaken our family?
She may have known who it was.
I want to have my baby back.
What started as a night of babysitting turned into a night of horror for one family.
There was another young London woman murdered, and still they're looking for her killer.
It's just like the life was drained right out of us when we heard that it was her.
Lost a sister. Lost my best friend. We got cheated on seeing her get married, given birth.
We were all broken. We were all broken and doing the best we could.
They raped her, they beat her. This man strangled her, stared into her face and watched her life slip away. What kind of an animal does this?
It's a nice picture. Was this for what, her high school graduation?
Yeah.
Yes.
This picture was taken
3 days before she was murdered,
Oh, was
October
it?
3rd.
Okay.
Her whole face lit up when she smiled.
We were very, very close. We were always doing things, going to the beach. Things were good. Last thing I remember is watching her walk across the 50 yards away.
At 11 o'clock that night, she came out of the apartment building and she blew me a kiss and I blew her a kiss back. And that's the last time I saw Donna alive.
This is the stuff of nightmares that, babysitters being stalked in the night and murdered. And this is every parent's worst nightmare.
People say, Carol, you should be over it.
No.
You can't. I want to hold her, I want to hug her again. I can't take the hurt, I can't take it.
We would like your permission to take this case on.
You have my permission 150%.
Mine too.
If there's people out there who know something or are involved, they'll be outed.
Their expectations are so high and so much hope is resting on this. It's kind of like you could see them light up. You are my hope.
There's a lot of collective trauma in this family, but seldom do I see, so many decades later, the type of raw emotion and palpable anger. This is a family that epitomizes what this initiative is about.
I've been a cop and a professor of criminology for years, and I've used that experience to assemble a squad of civilian subject matter experts.
They must approach each case completely unbiased, to not box themselves into conventional thinking, to bring fresh eyes and new technologies to the table.
Their job, and mine, is to investigate the coldest of cold cases, the murders that time forgot.
Donna Jean Alcock,
Original file number 83-125. This was the 125th murder in rural Ontario in 1983. On October 12th, 1983, Donna Jean Alcock was 17 years old. Approximately 6 p.m., she leaves her apartment here to go babysitting in the next building north. She's babysitting for a woman named Michelle who was going out to a local tavern that night. Approximately 1 a.m. now on October 13th, Michelle was driven home by a man she met at a local bar. She tells this man, wait in the car until I send the babysitter home, then you can come in. Michelle goes in, tells Donna Jean she can leave, but first gives her some money and says, can you please go to the nearby variety store and buy me a pack of cigarettes before you go home? The store is located in a commercial plaza just south of the apartment complex. By 2:30 a.m., Donna Jean never returned. Michelle goes to the store herself, and the clerk confirms, as he did later with police, that Donna Jean did in fact show up to buy the cigarettes, but that she looked terrified. The deposition is that she looked as though she had been crying. The next morning, at 9 a.m., Carol wakes up and finds that Donna Jean never came home, so she calls the police. The next afternoon, October 14th, 2 boys searching a nearby ravine discover the remains of what was suspected to be Donna Jean. When police finally arrive, they confirm that this is, in fact, Donna Jean's body. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled with an orange plastic bag shoved down her throat, still protruding from her mouth when she was found.
It was heartbreaking to hear the facts. It was done in such a vicious way.
An innocent young girl type of thing with her whole life to look forward to, and gone, just like that.
As the squad digs into this case, they're going to very quickly find themselves in uncharted territory. And any civilian squad that undertakes such a massive task as this is bound to only be as strong as its weakest link. So they all need to rise to the occasion and demonstrate the same confidence that got them here in the first place. Where do we go from here? This is a sex crime.
DNA.
There is DNA.
And has this DNA already been entered into the CODIS database?
It is in the CODIS database. CODIS is an acronym that stands for Combined DNA Index System. That system has 2 components: crime scene samples on one hand, convicted offender samples on the other hand. Every 24 hours, the 2 systems speak to each other and compare samples. If you're in that database and you've left your DNA at any crime scene, you will be matched to it.
And is there any links between it and any other scenes?
There has not been a CODIS hit as of yet.
Okay.
Which begs the question, does someone do this and just stop? Michelle Maynard is the woman Donna Jean was babysitting for the night she was murdered. One of the last people to see Donna Jean alive. Michelle disappeared for 6 days immediately after Donna Jean's murder.
6 days, you just kind of go underground. That seems very odd to me.
I think she would be hiding out if it was somebody she knew that did it.
If this murder had happened to an acquaintance of yours, wouldn't you be just there with open arms?
Who was this man she met at a local bar? What does he know? Why has he never come forward? Police went out and they canvassed the bars that the 2 had been at. They developed a description that enabled this composite drawing. The mystery man, as police and the media dubbed him. This was disseminated nationally. Numerous tips were received, all were checked out. Who was this man that drove Michelle home? The mystery man. A lot of things have been tried with this case and failed. So, where do we go from here? Monty?
I'm going to track down Michelle. Hopefully some more information that we can dig up here.
Because I think she needs to be spoken to, no question. Why doesn't somebody start by looking at the correlation between all of the things we have going on in this case, and how often does this come up?
Yeah, I hear correlation, I hear data. I can do this.
Dania?
I can look at the different virtual communities, different portals.
See if there's any chatter out there about Donna's murder.
I would be really interested in talking to those 2 boys, the ones that found Donna's body.
They were interviewed thoroughly and ruled out by DNA.
I think they may know more.
How did the boys know to find Donna Jean's body where it was? Everyone here knows what's expected of them. Let's start thawing this case out. Let's go.
Give it our best shot.
It's mind-boggling and incredibly frustrating to think that an innocent girl, 17 years old, was abducted in plain view of dozens of balconies so close to her own home.
There's not a lot to go on. It just seems really skinny.
This man of mystery, who is that? The woman that Donna Jean was babysitting for. What happened to her? How is it that in that short span from door to door, she disappeared? The squad of civilian subject matter experts and I are examining with fresh eyes the 30-year-old murder of Donna Jean Alcock. I've tasked Monty with locating Michelle Maynard, the woman for whom Donna Jean was babysitting the night she was murdered. Michelle returned to her apartment that night with a man known only as the Mystery Man, a man who's never been located, never been even identified. In order to find him today, 30 years later, we first need to find Michelle Maynard.
There's some things that don't add up to me with Michelle Maynard. I find it very odd that police couldn't find her for 6 days after the murder.
I still don't know exactly what she told them, but she had plenty of time to rehearse a story.
Wouldn't you want to try and help? I'm looking for a missing person. Her name's Michelle Maynard. Maybe you can help me out. Doesn't look familiar at all.
I haven't seen her.
No. There's lots of different ways to find people. Like, the very first thing I do is pick up a phone book, see if there's a name and an address. You could Google them. Then you go onto Facebook. Go to places wherever people meet and talk.
She looks familiar, but yeah. Check around there, like the meth clinic, the coffee house.
I haven't found her yet, but I'm close.
I'm calling Todd. He's one of the boys that found Donna's body. He was also an ex-boyfriend of hers. Even though he was excluded by police DNA, the family still thinks that he found the body too quickly. They think he knew where to look.
Can you tell me what happened that day that you found Donna?
I had a roommate at the time. He had a dog, and we had the dog with us. So just kind of walked around there, and everything just seemed ordinary, you know what I mean? Like, headed towards the cornfield. Walked over to the gravel pit. Then we headed towards a dead-end road, and the end of that road goes to a path that leads up to Fanshawe Dam. When we left there, then that's when the dog started acting a little weird. Started whining and pulling at its chain and kind of running back and forth and stuff. I was on the riverside. We seen what looked like a body. I just stopped right there as soon as I seen what, you know, I didn't know for sure it was Donna because I think from where I was, she was face down. You wouldn't know that that was a dead-end road if you weren't from the area. You wouldn't know that it was that secluded. It had to be somebody with a car. I honestly believe it was somebody that had to know the area.
Todd and his friend found the body quickly because they had a dog. His insight that he thought it was someone local is useful information that we need to verify. And once we do that, it may lead us to our killer.
What we're looking at here are two possible scenarios, two circles, if you will. An inner circle are family, friends, neighbors, immediate acquaintances, and then an outer circle, a stranger.
I presume the mystery man from the bar would fit into the outer circle then.
Right. A drifter, a transient, some kind of external predator. Assessing the scene environmentally, we'll get a better sense of which of the two circles is more likely. We don't know which route Donna took to the convenience store on the night she was killed, so we're headed to the apartment block where she babysat to see if we can find the most logical one. Wally, how's it going?
Hi, good.
Tammy's husband Wally's here with us this morning. He's basically our guide on the ground. What kind of lighting in the parking lot at the time?
There was no lights outside at all.
At all?
Period, no. Nobody heard nothing, nobody saw nothing. It's almost like
vanished.
Yeah.
It's pretty freaky to be walking down the same hallway that Donna might have walked down the night she died.
Okay, this is the apartment she was babysitting in. And she would have come out this door and went down the stairs to leave.
So she doesn't need to walk past any other apartments on this floor.
Yeah, the next nearest exit is way down the hall.
She leaves this apartment, make a straight shot out to this stairwell here, descend the stairs, and the exit is right at the bottom of the stairwell.
Yes.
This is clearly the path of least resistance.
There's no reason for her to interact with anyone in the building or
Exactly,
pass
yes.
anyone in the building unless they're in the stairwell.
It's one thing to see this complex on a map, make some measurements. It's quite another to visit the site, stand outside the very door where she left.
She would have started over here.
My guess is that the suspect watched Donna come out of the apartment, go to the store. We know she made it to the store. That then provided him with her path of approach that he could then expect her to follow when she returned, and that's when he attacked.
Taking the route we identified, I'm going to take some measurements and pinpoint the distance between the apartment and the convenience store. I want to plot the distance against a database of similar abductions, breaking them down into abductions by family members, abductions by acquaintances, and abductions by total strangers. And we'll then see into which category Donna best fits.
Take it right to the door.
It's 108.3 meters. The best conceivable outcome of this mapping effort is that it helps us to catch a killer.
I've been trying to track down Michelle Maynard, the woman that Donna was babysitting for the night she was killed, and finally, I found her. Yeah, Mike, Monty, how are you? I spoke to Michelle. Yeah. She's willing to meet with you. I'll tell her.
Finally, we've got something. I can't wait to speak with this Michelle, find out why it is she went missing for 6 days after the killing. What we need are some new clues about what happened that night. The civilian squad and I are examining the 30-year-old murder of Donna Jean Alcock in London, Ontario. By drawing on experience from their personal and professional lives, the team is bringing fresh eyes to this case. Monty has successfully located Michelle Maynard, the woman for whom Donna Jean was babysitting the night she was murdered. I now need to meet with Michelle and find out what she might remember, and more importantly, what she may have not told people over the years when it comes to this case. Take us through that night.
I was going to the bar, so she went to babysit for me, and this total stranger was sitting with my friends, offered me a ride home.
Did you assist the police in creating that composite drawing? There was a composite released to the
Yes,
public.
I did, but I guess that was no help.
Did he say where he was from?
No, I don't think so, no. Yeah, we got the pizza. We was eating some of it on the way home.
How much pizza was left in the box?
Maybe four slices or something after we got done eating.
In this particular case, we see some obvious examples of selective memory. She remembers there was 4 pieces of pizza left in the box, but she doesn't remember what she did in that hour that Donna Jean went missing.
We were out of cigarettes, so I said to Donna, would you go to the store and get us some cigarettes? Never thought nothing. She never come back.
How long after Donna Jean disappeared did you give a statement to the police?
That same day after I found out she didn't come home.
And did they ever touch base with you after that for further details?
Not that I recall, no, because I was shortly after that, I left the neighborhood.
How long after?
Maybe a month, maybe, or maybe a couple weeks, something like that.
Maybe a week?
I think I was on the verge of going before this all happened anyway.
Once again, she seems selectively forgetful about when and why she left the area after Donna Jean's murder. This makes me wonder if she's holding something back intentionally.
With the use of the composite sketch, I'm trying to find anybody who may know or recognize this mystery man that Michelle left with on that night. Why hasn't he come forward if he's got nothing to hide? You know of anyone that would be here right now that might have been still comes here that would have been around? The regulars are looking at composite sketch, and we'll see where it goes. Maybe you can help me out. You've been coming here a long time? I've had zero luck trying to track down the mystery man. Not surprising. It has been 30 years.
I've had Peter conduct various research to get a sense of the statistical likelihood of someone being kidnapped by an absolute stranger. I want him to then compare those figures to the data that we were able to gather at the scene of where Donna Jean was kidnapped. Did Donna Jean encounter someone known to her, or was this an attack by a random stranger?
Let's have a look here on the smart board. We have an overview. Statistics relating to the sexual assault and murder of Donna. Homicide following abduction is extremely rare. Only 0.4% of these abductions end in murder.
I mean, that's negligible, right?
It is.
Less than 1/2%.
Right. Only approximately 10% of victims taken from their home or around their home, about 100 meters radius, are taken by a complete stranger.
These sound like the two least probable scenarios statistically. Stranger abduction at or near the home, and an abduction period that ends in homicide. So combined then, what does the data tell you?
It's more likely than not that Donna was abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered by someone known to her.
As a media strategist, I'm reviewing newspapers, online materials, forums to find any connection to Donna Jean's case. To see if there were ever low-life criminals living in the area at the time of Donna's murders that we should be checking into. This cannot be a coincidence. I really think I'm onto something.
Okay, Dania, what have you got?
So I went through the news footage, the archival research, online, and I found something quite bone-chilling. There was an escaped convicted sex killer who was living in London when Donna went missing. He was convicted in the 1976 sex slaying of a 15-year-old and again in 1978 of a 16-year-old. He was living not only in London at the time, but around the same apartment that Michelle Maynard lived in.
To me, it's remarkable that he lived around the same apartment complex where Donna was the night she was murdered.
Was he linked to her? Did he murder her?
This is like lightning striking twice in the same place. It merits looking into full bore. Donna Jean Alcock. Dania has uncovered some new information that may have blown this case wide open.
There was an escaped convicted sex killer who was living around the same apartment that Michelle Maynard lived in.
That is remarkable.
He went by the alias name of Joseph James Tripp, and his real name, Joe Shepard.
We have what we call the +1 rule. Where there's one sex killer lurking, there's usually one or more alongside them. And if he's running with a crew in the area, we have to wonder what influence he could have imparted on them. I'm very curious to see who was in his inner circle, that even if they didn't know he was Joe Shepard and what he had done, would have still been impressed by this sort of criminal experience that he offered.
These sexual deviants, predators, I can see now with the internet that back in the day, it's not something you would just chat with someone. I wonder how they networked.
This has been the question for years. How did Bernardo and Homolka find each other by chance? Could all these lives have been saved? So Daniel, look deeper into this Joe Shepard guy. I want to know exactly if he's been interviewed about this case or other local unsolved cases. These guys don't just stop. I need to go back to the family and see what exactly they know about this Shepard connection. So our investigation so far has revealed a few points of interest that I need to ask you some clarifying questions about.
a Joseph Shepard or a Joe Shepard.
Yes.
Yeah.
What was your knowledge of him?
That same night that Donna was murdered, Joe Shepard and Michael Maynard were all drinking together on Joe Shepard's balcony.
The woman for whom Donna Jean was babysitting the night she was murdered, Michelle.
Yes.
She had a brother,
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
So Joe Shepard and Mike Maynard knew each other.
Yes.
Yes. He just hung around there because his sister lived there.
Okay. So he was routinely in the complex.
Yes. He had said to one of my cousins, it was a couple of days before Donna was murdered, he said, someday I'm gonna have my way with her.
Her is?
Donna Jean.
I learned a number of important things. The affiliation between Michael Maynard and Joe Shepard, who were associating the night of Donna Jean's disappearance. What's also remarkable is the disclosure that Michael Maynard had made statements in the days leading to Donna Jean's murder that he was going to have his way with her.
Hi, you've reached Renee's cell phone. I can't take your call right now, but please leave a message and I'll call you right back.
Renee, I need you to look into Michael Maynard. We either need to rule him out or elevate him to person of interest, the same as Joe Shepard. If you could get on that as soon as you can and get back to me, I'd appreciate it.
It was very difficult to get any information about Michael Maynard, either in print or online. I'm still checking to see whether Michael's DNA was compared against that of Donna's killer. I did find an obituary, however, that was printed in the London Free Press in 2001. The only information about his cause of death was that he died suddenly, so any information he may have had about Donna's murder has died with him.
Hi, Mike, it's Antonella here. As I was going through the files, I came across a name that I've never heard before in association to this case. Her name is Joanne, and I think she's somebody we need to speak to. She was at the bar the same time that Michelle was there with the mystery man.
Hi, Joanne.
Hi.
It's Mike. We spoke on the phone.
Yes.
You were there that night at the Town and Country, correct?
Yes. There were 5 or 6 of us sitting at the table. The guy in question, now he was sitting at our table, but I don't ever remember hearing his name, or he seemed like a nice enough guy, like he was friendly.
Nothing weird about him?
No, not at all.
Take me through Michelle's interaction with this guy.
She's pretty drunk.
Joanne to me seems credible. She has a very clear and independent recollection of the events that night.
Michelle left with this guy. The press called him the mystery man. This is the composite drawing.
That's what he came up with between mine and hers. Put the two of them together and come up with this.
So this is basically a combination of what you remembered and what Michelle remembered?
Yeah, what I was seeing in my head.
Right.
He couldn't put it down on paper.
This is a great sketch, but it doesn't sound like it's the mystery man. This is a combination of two, maybe three different people.
I'm going back to talk with Michelle Maynard to see what she has to say about her brother's involvement with Joe Shepard. Last time I saw her, I felt she was holding back. Maybe this time, she'll come clean. Did your brother Mike ever express an interest to you in any of the Alcott girls?
No.
On that night, did you see your brother Mike anywhere around the apartment complex?
No.
Joe Tripp, whose real name was Joe Shepard, was an escaped sex killer from the United States, from Tennessee.
Oh my God.
He was a priority in the United States, and he was living across from you.
Oh my God. No, I did not know that.
And Mike never brought up the name.
No.
I have no doubts that Michelle has carried this case with her over the years. But I also have no doubts that she and her brother Mike had detailed conversations about Donna Jean's murder up to the time of his death. The question that remains is whether or not Michelle has convinced herself that a certain series of events occurred that night as a matter of selective memory, or because she's decided to be deliberately misleading. To answer that question, I need her to take a polygraph exam, a lie detector test. If we provided you the opportunity of a polygraph with a private examiner,
I would take it.
in trying to track down the killer of Donna Jean Alcock, the squad and I have come to the conclusion that it was most likely someone local. Michael Maynard was someone local at the time and is a possible suspect. I've asked his sister Michelle to undergo a polygraph test.
You understand why you're here today?
Yes, I do.
To confirm whether or not she's been protecting him all these years.
This goes above your heart.
Don O'Connor, he's a very well-respected and experienced polygraph examiner. What he's gonna tell me, you can take that to the bank.
Please remain still. The test is about to begin.
It's not completely foolproof, but it will provide us with some insight into what she really knows and point us in the right direction and where to go from here. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
She seems to have highly selective memories of specific events. Do you think maybe where she's unclear on things, she's just making stuff up?
The two issues that we explored was, did she know for sure who committed the murder?
Right.
If someone had told her, confessed to her in the last 30 years. When she said no to that question, she was telling the truth. And also an issue, was she withholding any information? And she passed that question also. She's not withholding any information.
On the key issues, you're satisfied.
She's been truthful, yeah.
Thank you very much.
No problem. I hope you get the person responsible.
For 30 years, people have speculated that Michelle had something to do with what happened to Donna Jean that night. The tests confirm that's not the case.
I also found out that the police tested Michael's DNA, and it was not a match for Donna's killer.
From here on in, I'm gonna start looking at who else in that housing complex, in that neighborhood, who may have known Donna Jean was responsible for her murder.
I've been looking into Joe Shepard, who was living around the same apartment complex as Michelle Maynard and Donna Jean when she was murdered. I got the information on Joe Shepard. In 1988, the police captured him and extradited him back to Tennessee. In 1995, the police investigated Shepard as a suspect in Donna's murder.
Okay.
Ran his blood sample against her DNA from her recovered body. And then he was excluded as a suspect. And he actually passed away in 2010 in prison. Shepard seemed like a perfect match, a convicted sex killer in the area that night.
It's important to investigate each lead thoroughly, to not jump to conclusions, to not get boxed into a specific theory. Joe Shepard looked like a strong suspect, but in the end, he's excluded by DNA. We're really struggling with this case now. All of our leads have come to nothing so far. Donna's case is so random, so apparently isolated. We're dealing with someone familiar with the area, who resided in the area and knew its layout, knew the dump site, knew who Donna was. Hello? Just when I thought we had run out of steam, I get a call from someone who found out what we were doing here, has some information they want to bring to us, and they want to talk.
Between the ages of 17 and 18, walking into a home and hearing men in the living room, one talking about things he had done to girls.
How many people would have been in the room?
There was 6, 7 guys.
There's 4 reasons why people offer themselves up as sources. I use the acronym MICE: money, ideology, coercion, or ego. In this case, she's doing this because she believes it's the right thing. It's an ideology, and that is the most credible reason a source comes forward and why we need to listen to her.
I remember them talking about Donna and the apartment building on.
They mentioned the apartments. Is there any statement he made to implicate himself?
I I remember them talking about the car that he was driving. He had to get painted that night. His name was...
Okay. And said this?
Yes. He was laughing about the things he did. And then I wanted to leave because I got really scared, and his wife didn't want me to leave right away because I looked scared, and she just wanted me to calm down before I left.
So he's talking about what happened to Donna. He's using the first person, I. He mentions a garbage bag. He mentions a car that then gets repainted that night. This source to me seems very credible. She has a very clear and independent recollection, and I sense genuine fear on her behalf. She also mentioned an ex of hers who has his own independent recollection of these same events, but for whatever reason, he's chosen to keep it a secret. When your ex would break down and cry, what would he say to you?
That he was scared, that he knew that it was... that I better not ever say anything.
So someone has independently verified what you remember?
Absolutely.
This is remarkable new information. We need to find out what his connection was to Donna Jean, if he knew her, where he lived then, and where he lives now. I'm really wondering if he was also part of Joe Shepard's inner circle. As a cop, you learn to acquaint yourself pretty quick with the +1 rule. Where there's one, others will follow. Could be a weapon, could be a suspect. Where there's one sex killer, there's usually one or more alongside them. I'm wondering if he was the +1. Breaking developments. I've been approached by an anonymous source. She has detailed information with respect to statements made by a man in the years following Donna Jean's murder. So Monty, when I give you his name, I need you to find out, A, if he's still alive, and B, if he is, where he is. Renee, I need you to look into his criminal background. See what you can find in the archives with respect to other convictions. See if they fit within the framework of Donna Jean's murder. Time is of the essence, let's go.
Do you know by chance where he lived? What I gotta do now is find this person of interest. I got a lot of contacts in London. I got his name, and I know when he left. DC, huh?
There isn't anything just with his first and last name, but I'll try a couple different variations.
And they're just gonna have to go through maybe some of their friends' connections and see whether or not anything is relevant.
It helps to have something really to pull you in a direction that you feel is making progress.
We could be hot on the trail right now. Potentially, this could lead us somewhere. British Columbia, please.
While the rest of the squad firms up our suspect's connection to Donna Jean Alcock, I'm going back to Joanne, the woman who saw Michelle leave with the mystery man the night Donna Jean was killed. It's my thought that if we can redo the composite drawing using modern technologies and get an accurate picture of this guy, that the police can track him down. So this blank face matches more or less the existing composite's head shape.
The chin is way off.
The chin is way off, so you remember that.
It's more of a wider chin.
We're going to be refining this composite drawing 30 years later using new technology. It's developed by a former LAPD and Baltimore police sketch artist. I want to use the original drawing as a referent and then just enhance it. Anything distinct? Bad teeth, good teeth, big lips, small lips?
It's not as thin as that.
How are you with the hairline?
Yeah, that's good. He had a bit of sideburns too, though.
This is a person of interest. You don't know who he is or what value he holds in the investigation. You just know you need to find him. We are at the end. As you know, a tip was received suggesting that a man who lived nearby in the years after Donna Jean's murder was boasting about his involvement. He frequented that apartment complex. He had associates in Michelle's building. The question is, where is he now?
I found him.
Of course.
He's in plain sight, in his own name.
What do we know, Renee, about his criminal history?
Well, his last contact with the judicial system was when he was acquitted in the case of a rape of a 14-year-old girl. And based on where he was living in East London at that time, he would likely have very intimate knowledge of the dump site.
This guy lived in the area at the time of Donna Jean's murder. He had associates in Donna Jean's building. He had knowledge of and access to the dump site nearby. He was actually boasting about his being responsible for Donna Jean's murder in the years after her death, and he was arrested for the sexual assault of another teenage girl in subsequent years, acquitted, and then went in the wind. You add it all up, and it speaks for itself. I feel we are closer now than ever. People are aware, as a result of your efforts, what we're doing and are coming out of the woodwork. This case is being worked and worked hard by the police. But trust me, you've done your job here. And that's what I'm going to tell Donna Jean's family. The squad can take this case no further, and the police have received our research and analysis. If I can turn your mind back to when we first started this, and one of the first questions I asked all of you was, what do you think happened? And you said you had no idea, other than it was your lingering suspicion that someone in Michelle's family was somehow involved or covering for somebody. And we had her take a polygraph examination. And the results indicate she's being truthful.
What?
She lied.
What? No, she didn't, apparently.
She never did. Those questions include her covering for her brother Mike that had been cleared on DNA. I interviewed Michelle at length. There is one thing that she was never fully truthful about, and that is the description of the man she went home with that night. There was another witness who had a very clear recollection and provided a very good description of this mystery man, as he was known. So we made a new sketch of what he actually looked like using state-of-the-art technology.
So what he looks like.
You remember what he looks like?
Yeah, he looks just like that. Did. Now he's bald, I believe.
We can't rule out she took home a guy from the neighborhood. Either way, this is the missing link. Even without the digital age enhancement complete, Laura thinks she recognizes this revised composite as a guy who was hanging around the complex at the time of Donna Jean's murder. Who knows what other new tips will come in? We're going to immediately pass this information on to the police. We also know that a viable suspect, as a result of recent tips, is...
She knew him.
We also know that this person isn't in the DNA data bank for offenders, meaning that they have not been, since the late 90s, either in prison or convicted of a violent crime.
I'm angry, confused a bit.
I just want this person caught. I want him to look in my eye so he can see what he's done to me and my family, my dad.
There's been a changing of the guard with the OPP. There is more momentum on this case probably than ever. And Donna Jean's killer is running out of places to hide.
Like, thank God for you.
It's a start.
Well, I'm gonna make a bunch of copies of this and I'm gonna plaster it everywhere.
A tip will solve this case.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My father was a tireless advocate for the law. He was a criminal prosecutor. Some say ruthless, others say righteous. Yeah, I'm cut from the same cloth. I can't really remember who I was before I became a cop. It's my job to make bad things happen to bad people.
An open letter to the man who murdered my child. As a mother, I'm suffering because I've lost my dearly loved daughter. He killed my gentle child.
Toronto was a dangerous place for Margaret, but she was not streetwise.
Warden Woods Park was not a place to be.
It was wild and foreboding, where horrible things could happen.
Why didn't we warn her?
Police found the body of 21-year-old Margaret McWilliams in Warden Woods Park August 28th.
At first, it was terrible. I would wake up and think I had seen Margaret, or Margaret was talking to me. And I had nightmares as I would scream.
It's 26 years, and they still haven't found the person who murdered our daughter. That's Margaret, as she was when she was murdered.
How old was she here?
She was 21.
People can be so courageous and so resilient. I can't even imagine going on with my life if somebody murdered my child. There's nothing that could be as bad.
It's important to meet the family to get their blessing to go forward with reopening this case and to remind us of the person behind this story. Well, the more I hear about Margaret's case, the more I'm convinced that it was and still is solvable.
I hope it can be, because I'm running out of years. I would really like to know.
Margaret is frozen at 21. For her sake, we have to do everything that we can to find out who took her away.
Ivan and Charlotte's cause are, I think, why cold cases fascinate people and why they demand answers and closure years later. This, to me, epitomizes the value of a cold case squad.
I've been a cop and a professor of criminology for years, and I've used that experience to assemble a squad of civilian subject matter experts.
They must approach each case completely unbiased, to not box themselves into conventional thinking, to bring fresh eyes and new technologies to the table.
Their job, and mine, is to investigate the coldest of cold cases, the murders that time forgot.
Today's case. Margaret Louise McWilliam, murdered August 27th, 1987, at age 21. Original case file 1987-36. It's the 36th homicide in the city of Toronto in 1987. The facts are as follows. August 27th, 1987, sometime in the early evening, she leaves her modest basement apartment in Scarborough. She went jogging in Warden Woods Park. She never returned. Somewhere along the path in that park, she met her attacker. When she failed to show up for work for her next shift, her boss called police. This was not in keeping with her behavior. A full-scale search of the park was undertaken, and police cadaver dogs later located Margaret's body in this vicinity. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled with a piece of her own clothing, an item torn from her jogging suit.
Was any assailant DNA recovered from the scene?
That's what we're gonna have to determine.
And what about the condition of her body? Would you say it was a brutal assault?
The injuries and trauma to the body are consistent with someone being ambushed. All evidence points to this being a brutal attack. There is no other crime more injurious to a community and to just what it is to be human than to kill another human being.
It's certainly shocking to review the details of the case, with the method of killing described in such grisly detail.
The idea here is to not mimic what the police have done. The idea is to start anew. I'm interested in your insights. You all have 6 weeks with which to figure out why this case went cold and reinvigorate it.
What do we know about any other sexual assaults that had occurred in the area?
At the time, there was no sexual offender registry. That's going to be one of the things that you're going to have to look into.
As far as tips go, was there a lot?
The tips did generate one solid lead. The creation of this composite drawing. They are a person of interest who could be a witness or a suspect. This composite was created following tips from the public about a man seen leaving Warden Woods Park at or about the time that Margaret is believed to have been killed. Composite sketches can be very helpful in an investigation. That said, they're not without their problems. They're frequently drawn from different eyewitnesses and then interpreted by the artist. Often those eyewitness versions are also contaminated by their own existing prejudices or biases.
So is there any trace or impression evidence found at the scene that would allow us to cross-reference with this individual or other persons of interest?
Indeed there is. There was a patent shoe print left at the scene. We know the make, we know the style of shoe. What we don't have is the person to link the unique or individual characteristics of this shoe. It's a bit of a test for their ability to differentiate between important probative evidence, as we say, and what we call the red herrings or the distractors. So this is a rite of passage for them as much as it is an indicator for me of who's going to lead this squad and rise to the task. This plea from Charlotte McWilliam, Margaret's mother, is more real today than ever.
As a mother, I'm suffering because I've lost my dearly loved daughter. He killed my gentle child. She did him no wrong. I don't think my pain will ever go away.
It is a parent's worst nightmare. It definitely affects you at a personal level.
You want to bring a sense of peace almost to the family because they've been suffering because it's been so long, 26, 27, some odd years.
There's this feeling that I need to make sure we take care of them. Want to make sure that we're being respectful at all times when we talk about the families and make sure that we honor the victim.
We really need to investigate with fresh eyes, using new perspectives. See if we can get closer today to capturing this killer who has eluded authorities for over 26 years. Let's talk about initial investigative action items in this case and who's going to do what.
I'm most interested in the shoe print, how deep it was, if you can infer body height, body mass.
Put that in as action item number 1.
I want to look at the other cases that happened in 1987 to see if there's any kind of correlation to this one.
Here's a term you may not have heard before, microfiche. Antonella?
What kind of person did this? Do we have a psychological profile?
We know something about how they dress. We have the shoe impression. There's some additional facts that you can get just from the shoe alone. Monty?
Who was in the neighborhood that was maybe sexual offenders, known creeps? Try and get a feel for the neighborhood by talking to people who lived there. The first thing that came to mind was Paul Bernardo. He was very active at that time in Scarborough.
The MO is actually very similar. He would wait and beset victims and then attack them at random. This could have been one of his earlier crimes, and it would be very logical to want to include him.
Now I'm going to look into Paul Bernardo, see where he was at the time of Margaret's murder, and see if there's a connection. Wasn't Colonel Russell Williams around Scarborough at that time?
Actually, he was. He attended U of T Scarborough campus that same year.
Yeah.
Colonel Russell Williams, also known as the Killer Colonel, was the commander in charge of Canadian Forces Base Trenton up until 2009, when he was arrested, charged, and convicted of numerous offenses, including a number of bizarre sexual offenses and ultimately 2 counts of first-degree murder. Williams started as a peeping Tom and a fetish B&E artist, but at least that we know of, didn't escalate to crimes of the magnitude of Margaret's murder until much later. I don't see a connection there. It's highly unlikely that he's our guy. We need to focus on more viable suspects.
I met the family over the weekend. I feel like I owe it to them to work quickly. I can't be too shy, I can't hold back.
When you think of any mother or any family missing their child or their brother or sister, it's impossible to imagine.
I've always wanted to help people. Someone has to stand up, and some people either are unable or they're just afraid, and I'm not afraid.
I'd be lying if I said that there wasn't some inherent element of danger to all of this. People might be hostile. Each person is free to help out other people. You can work as a team. So let's say 72 hours before we meet back for, at the very least, a progress report. You all have your assignments, you all have your investigative action items. Let's get out there and let's start thawing this case out.
Police found the body of 21-year-old Margaret McWilliams in Warden Woods Park August 28th.
One of the key challenges in catching Margaret's killer is the fact that there are no known suspects. We're starting from ground zero. Right now, I've got Antonella meeting with a forensic psychologist to help build a psychological profile of this killer.
When I looked at the details of Margaret McWilliams, her murder, it was brutal, it was violent, it was vicious. Maybe we can get a picture of the kind of person, like where would they live? Would they be a transient? Those are all very important features that we need to look at in order to determine the individual that would do something like that. What characteristics would a person like that have, would you say?
Certainly not an easy case because there's not that much information available. I saw a number of crime scene behaviors that I thought related to a certain level of impulsivity, which is certainly a good discriminator in terms of looking at rapists and sexual murderers. It's definitely a medium to high risk location. Someone could come by, someone could hear the victim. This way of life this person has is gonna filter out into other things. So keeping a steady job is gonna be difficult. He's gonna get in fights with his other colleagues and stuff at work. There's probably not that much involved in the world that you and I walk around in.
To know that Margaret's killer was impulsive and a risk taker tells me a lot. This is somebody who probably thought they were above the law. Somebody who may have a long record of criminal activity, and this person may have murdered before. What would you say his state of mind would have been at the time? Because we know that from the evidence, we know that he punched Margaret in the face.
So punching her in the face was probably because she was struggling. If you struggle, I'm gonna hit you in the face. And it's very nonchalant. Offender will justify it in that way.
Based on what you know about this particular person, they may have crossed paths.
In criminology, we have a theory called routine activity theory, which relates to people movement around their geographical space. We all follow routines. We don't deviate from them very often. So there's something about this area that this offender was in it for some reason.
Geographic profiling is a great tool to help us determine what type of offender we're dealing with in relation to where the crime occurred.
He likes to search for victims. It's frequented by young girls jogging at that particular time.
In Margaret's case, I think we're looking at either a hunter or a troller. Has either targeted her specifically or targeted users of that path specifically.
So, yeah, it's a good chance that he knew that area, that he was familiar with that park.
This is really significant. To find out that Margaret's killer likely lived in the same area that he killed her in will do a lot to help us focus this investigation.
The location of this murder is going to be critical in helping solve this puzzle. It's key that we get as much information about Warden Woods Park as possible.
I'm going to try to locate the scene of the crime from 1987 when Margaret was attacked here, so that we can develop a better idea of whether the perpetrator was familiar with this area, to what extent was this a crime of opportunity, what kinds of places there were for a perpetrator to conceal himself prior to the attack, and during the crime if there were other people using the park. So these three trees are the trees that are in this photograph from 1987. Hopefully I'll be able to calculate with more precision from the photographs where Margaret was dragged off of this path into the woods behind us. It likely would have been easier to drag her into the ravine, but based on these photographs, there was very little cover to be able to conceal the crime. When I'm analyzing a crime scene or dealing with a case, I try not to put myself in the mindset of the victim so that I can stay as objective and scientific as possible. But knowing what I know about Margaret in this case, she probably came to Warden Woods Park because she thought it would give her a taste of the country, being isolated from busy roads. But this is really a dangerous area. It's very sad and frightening to know that really horrible people took advantage. This crime scene suggests to me that we're dealing with a hunter type of offender. There are features of this park that have been deliberately taken advantage of, and the perpetrator would have had to know this area intimately to take advantage of those features. I'm going to text Peter these coordinates so he can get to this exact location for his investigation.
Daniel, let's go.
Got it.
Now that we have the exact location, we'll be able to determine the depth of this foot impression, and this will allow us to calculate the offender's height and weight.
One of my strengths is that having lived in the city for a long time, I've got a list of contacts and friends who know friends and people I've come across over so many years, and it helps me quite often in my PI work. Perhaps a person of interest, perhaps, used to hang around here. This was 1987. Now I'm trying to track down anyone in the area that may have a connection to Margaret's case. Bernardo, he's a possible suspect. I want to know if I could rule him in, rule him out. About the fourth or fifth place I went to, this customer told me about someone that used to work there who was assaulted and raped in 1984. I want to talk to her and see if the details match the attack on Margaret. So did you know this perpetrator?
I met him that day through some friends.
Right.
He was kind of coming on me a little strong.
Did he beat you up at all or hit you at any time?
Threatened me, told me he had a knife.
Oh, okay.
He would use it, but he didn't want to. If I just would comply, then as long as things went his way, everything would be okay.
It can be difficult interviewing about delicate things of this nature, the sexual assault. The memories come flooding back to them, and I could see the emotion. And so was there any strangling or choking or anything like that?
Yeah, he did at one point grab me by the throat, and there was. After that incident, I never saw him again at all.
I really thought I was onto something with Lisa there, but the MOs, they don't match. Margaret didn't know her attacker. Lisa, she was introduced to hers, so I'm just gonna have to keep digging.
I'd like to look at the relationship between foot impression depth and body weight over that surface area. Coming from a physics background, I was very interested in getting more details about that shoe print, because that's one of the few hard pieces of evidence we know. I want to conduct a biometric test. If we can determine the depth of that impression, then combined with its length, we will be able to infer the height and weight of the killer. We have to somehow figure out where these footprints were found. You know, were they found down there? Were they found on the path?
How close to the body?
The soil character does change. No matter how finely we could measure a depth in this soil, we have no way of knowing if it was here versus anywhere else, so. Unfortunately, when we arrived on scene, we were unable to determine where these footprints might have been, and so this experiment is a non-event. As a civilian with an academic background, this kind of on-the-ground active investigation presents a whole new type of challenge for me, and I'm gonna have to think very hard how I pursue it and how I proceed with my next steps.
Got a guy we might want to take a look at here. This guy is nasty, nasty piece of work. Suspected of and been convicted of several violent rapes. escaped from prison in Connecticut, headed up to Toronto 5 days before Margaret's murder. Somewhat fits the MO, possible person of interest. I've got to go canvass the neighborhood of Warden Woods anyways. So while I'm out there, I'll ask around. It might jog memory, especially if we can show them a photo of it.
Right, it gets them reinvested. This guy is definitely worth looking at. He's a fugitive sexual deviant, very sadistic, on the run from the law. We know he might have been in the area at the time.
It's 25 years ago. You've got to start somewhere.
If there's a connection to Margaret's murder, we need to find out now. For the first few weeks of this investigation, I gave my civilian squad free rein to come at Margaret McWilliams' unsolved murder in their own way, with fresh eyes and using their specific areas of expertise. Now I'll see if I need to tighten that rein. Welcome back. I'm very curious to hear what everyone's come up with so far. Antonella, can we start with you?
Sure. I met with the forensic psychologist at Ryerson, Dr. Alastair Goodwill. He thinks it was probably somebody that was familiar with Warden Woods Park. He said this person was probably known to police and probably had a criminal record based on things other than sexual offenses.
Sexual offenders frequently begin as peeping Toms. Once that fails to satisfy their deviant sort of impulses, then they escalate their crimes from there. All right, next group.
We traveled to Warden Woods Park. Unfortunately, once we arrived, we were unable to locate where the killer's footprints might have been, so this experiment was a washout.
Peter needs to not forget that he serves a valuable role on this team. I need to see him elevate his confidence level. Peter, what I need you to do now is to create a geographical map. Identify and plot in all known murders and sexual assaults in Warden Woods, not just in the park, but in the surrounding area. Right? I need you to account for commonalities in terms of MO, victimology, all the data points that will allow us to make violent crime linkage analyses. I need them to be as accurate as possible. Dania, continue your search on similar crimes over that 10-year period to allow Peter to build his interactive map. Antonella, you're meeting with the fashion historian. That's going to complement the forensic psychological profile that you've already got.
We have the hat from the composite sketch, and we have the shoe evidence still to look into. The question is, could they have been from the same person?
Monte, I need you to simultaneously look into both and Paul Bernardo. See if you can exclude one or both, or leave in one or both. Either way, pursue it further. We're dealing with a very compressed timeline. Let's get this done.
I was working on an angle, wondering, if Paul Bernardo was around. A little bird told me that he was out of the country at the time. Would you happen to know that? I was speaking there to a retired police officer that I know. He said, I can confirm it because I worked side by side with one of the lead detectives on that case. Bernardo was not in the country. So now I can move forward, and that's the end of that.
This tread pattern is distinctive to this type of shoe. There's no other shoe like this with that tread pattern.
I'm here to talk to Dr. Allison Matthews-David, who is a fashion historian, to show her the shoe print that was found at the scene and also composite drawing, to talk to her about whether or not she can speculate as to the type of person that may have been involved in this murder. The case we're investigating, it's a murder that happened in 1987. What we have is one piece of evidence. It's a shoe print that we have that I'd like to show you. Okay. And also, we have a composite drawing of a person of interest. And I was wondering if you can give me an idea of what you think.
In 1986, the Air Jordan 2 was released, and that was the first luxury sneaker. Cost $100. This shoe is a knockoff of that. Okay. Because not everyone could afford the actual Nike Air Jordan 2. But it has very similar detailing. It's got a similar sole print from what you showed me.
Okay, so it would have been someone that might have been aware of the Air Jordan 2 and would have been interested in possibly having something very similar, right?
Totally. It suggests someone who is really in touch with the trends, but without paying the price tag for it.
Okay. What is it that you think you can tell us about the person that might be wearing this cap?
In the 1980s, it would have been worn by probably a fan of hip-hop. It was an older style that got recycled by the hip-hop movement.
Okay. Anything in terms of the socioeconomic background of a person that might be wearing this type of hat?
There are suburban white kids imitating hip hop, but it was still very much a kind of African-American culture.
Could it have been possible that this was the same person that wore the shoes that was in the composite drawing?
The hat is very much a marker of that hip hop culture, whereas the shoe, it's a bit more generic and could have been any young man.
The hat was likely worn by someone interested in a particular culture, but the shoes could have been bought by anyone. We need to keep an open mind at this point.
Now that Bernardo's been excluded from the investigation, I've been focusing on finally I was able to track someone down who knew him back in the 80s. What I wanted to ask you about was this man here.
It's Chuck.
You know him as Chuck?
Right.
Okay, his real name is...
We knew the guy as Chuck.
How did you come to know him?
He frequented the bar.
And what was Chuck like?
Well, he's on a hair trigger. He was a troublemaker, but he was hot and cold. He had to be ejected several times.
Did he ever seem close to anyone? Was there anyone he came in with often?
He always was alone.
Did he ever tell you that you recall anything about his background? Maybe he was sitting at the bar?
No, never learned anything about that.
Being a father and looking into a case of this nature, you put yourself in the position where, what if that was my kid? If it comes to you later, perhaps you can give me a call of anyone who might have been close to him somehow. I think I'm really onto something now. I gotta look at more closely.
Right now, I've got access to the original analysis, the behavioral profile of Margaret's killer. I'm looking for all the information I can find with respect to the MO, the signature, or any other elements of the crime scene that will help us link Margaret's killer to any other homicides.
Renee, it's Mike. I need everyone back at the squad room right now.
I've got access to the original behavioral profile of Margaret's killer. It fundamentally changes the direction of this case and what we're going to do next. I've been able to acquire part of the original crime file. Some of the facts in this case are much more grisly, much more tragic than we initially thought when we undertook this investigation. We know that, yes, Margaret was attacked in Warden Woods Park, on the path. Her clothes showed no signs of soiling. No drag marks, no dirt, no mud. Clothes were arranged neatly in a pile.
The family's just as much as a victim as Margaret was. If we can bring light to this case and actually get it solved, I think we would put a lot of peace back into the family.
Margaret's body was found supine or face up, wearing only her socks.
She was such a kind, honest, moral person who would never hurt anyone. And then to have this happen to her, to such an innocent being, just makes it even worse or even more brutal.
Margaret had been raped from the front. Cause of death was ligature strangulation. The weapon used was actually Margaret's own sweatshirt. It was turned inside out, the sleeve fastened around her throat using what's known as a granny knot. The shoe print recovered at the scene was actually not from the soil, but from an impression of Margaret's body. The offender stood on her and reefed on the sleeve until she was dead. This crime has all of the psychopathic tendencies to suggest whether weeks, months, or even years later, there's no question in my mind that this killer struck again. The question is, where are they now? It's our job to find out. The squad has been looking at as a potential person of interest in Margaret's murder. I need to know if Monty's found any evidence to actually support this theory. What are the circumstances in this other attack that you told me about a month after Margaret's?
It was a 15-year-old girl who was in the area, and he forced her at night point to perform sexual acts on him. He did not strangle nor kill her, so...
Okay. So markedly different in terms of...
Different indeed.
Victim MO for sure, the use of the weapon. Not satisfied that this is the same type of psychopathology, same MO, same signature for sure, based on what you're telling me now. The differences are just too prominent.
As I investigated further, this guy, it just doesn't fit.
We're running out of leads, we're running out of time with both and Bernardo off the table. We're back to square one. We really need a breakthrough.
We're building a geographic profile of the Toronto area, looking for commonalities in sexual homicides over a 20-year period, from 1977, 10 years before Margaret's murder, to 1997, 10 years after. The hope here is that we find a match for Margaret's murder. Danny, these cases you found, this is big data.
There's a lot here.
Yeah, we're not gonna make much sense of this unless we convert these addresses to coordinates, plot them on a map.
Okay, so we're looking at the longitudinal and latitudinal coordinates so we can place that on the map that you've created, is that correct?
That's right. The most important data in our view is the date of each assault, the modus operandi, and our best estimate of a geographic location for this assault.
There is a lot of action going on in Scarborough at this time.
Attempted murders, stabbings, sexual assaults.
It's kind of scary.
Warden Woods is kind of a killing ground. I think I found something. A data point just a few minutes walk from Margaret McWilliam. It's essentially in Warden Woods. Based on what Danny and I have just seen, I'm optimistic that this is going to crack the case open.
The victim, who's in her 30s, was found near Warden Avenue.
The squad is working around the clock to try to solve Margaret's murder. Their own personal lives are being put on hold to get it done, but we've run out of leads. The exception is Peter and Daniel, who are working on a data map of sexual homicides over a 10-year period around Margaret's murder and in the general vicinity of Warden Woods Park. They're looking to find a connection with any other murder and identify the killer.
I think I found something.
The victim, who's in her 30s, was found near Warden Avenue.
All right, home stretch time. Where are we at with Margaret's case?
So if I can just direct your attention to the smartboard. So what we're looking at here is an overview of the GTA. And Warden Woods, so Danny and I looked back in all the archival records and we ruled out all homicides other than sexually motivated attacks on female victims.
Okay.
We've done our best to geolocate each one. If we zoom into Warden Woods now, we see the point representing Margaret McWilliam. And this point here, labeled by the victim name of, we consider our primary hit.
Okay, tell me why.
Strangulation, the rape, the geographic location.
She was found naked. Her clothes and the contents of her purse were found strewn about her naked body.
That was in 1992.
Peter, who was ultimately arrested and convicted for that second offense?
The man responsible for the murder of goes by the name of...
What do we have on him?
Here we've mapped the location where he was living at the time of his arrest at point A. Less than 2 kilometers away was the location of his murder.
It's a diagonal line through the park.
Yeah.
The park itself is the hunting ground. This is very compelling. We just caught a break for the first time in decades. It's very exciting. That's what this is about.
I'm extremely hopeful that what Daniel and I have found will crack this case.
Peter's expertise in analysis, computers, all the things that make him a strong asset to this team are really coming to the surface. From here on in, we need to devote all resources to validating this match. Daniel, you go to the courthouse, obtain transcripts for conviction for the murder of the secondary victim. Contained in that will be the evidence we need to make a comparison with respect to MO, signature, etc.
Got it. If it turns out that the MO matches Margaret's murder, we're really onto something.
Let's get at it. All right, the court transcripts relating to murder and trial. Similar act evidence, let's go.
Was found nude, lying on her back, concealed under a tree.
Margaret, also found nude, other than her socks, also lying on her back, also concealed under a tree. Next.
Police found clothing, footwear, her black leather purse, and other contents scattered around the body and in the area.
In Margaret's attack, her personal belongings, other than her headphones, also found scattered around the body, if not so erratically, circumscribing the body, as we say. Next.
Neck area bruised, eyes swollen and blackened.
Likewise, in Margaret's case, severe beating to the face and head, both eyes also blackened.
Post-mortem examination, a ruptured liver, larynx, and extensive soft tissue damage to the face and the neck.
In Margaret's case, we have severe trauma to the larynx and a ruptured liver as well, from about 10 to 15 blows to the abdomen. There's little question we're looking at the same signature, and by extension, the same killer. After weeks worth of analysis and investigation, and quite frankly, running into dead ends, the squad, in their efforts to come up with new leads in the murder of Margaret McWilliam, finally have a name as our first person of interest. I'm about to consult with Dr. Eric Hickey, arguably the world authority on serial homicide and sexual violence. He's been a gunslinger in helping take down serial killers with the FBI for over 30 years. How stable a MO and signature do you think there is between the 1987 attack,
The fact that she resembled the previous victim, the same location, it strikes me that this man was comfortable going to that park. He knew what he was doing, and he would go through that same pattern of sexual assault.
Out of 10 in terms of points of connection, this likely being the same suspect, what do your instincts tell you?
On a 10 being a perfect match, an 8.
8 out of 10.
8, which would be, for me, like a home run. People who are serial killers can go on for many, many years. He didn't get therapy in prison. He didn't get corrected in prison. So I think you've got something to be quite concerned about.
All right, time's up. The evidence uncovered over the last few weeks has provided some compelling information. All of it strongly suggests the involvement of in Margaret's murder. I'd just like to go around the table, and some people had some outstanding action items that I think we should discuss. Renee.
Through a police contact, I was able to establish that there is still a banker's box full of evidence from Margaret's case, which means that there is the potential that with modern technology, we can access biological material, DNA in particular, from that evidence. There could be a way to link the suspect concretely to Margaret's case.
You may not look it, but I've been a copper for a while, and when I started, you needed a pool of blood. Today, it's handling something. Skin cells, sweat, that's enough. One outstanding item during the course of our investigation that was never really firmed up and nagged at me was this composite drawing developed with the assistance of citizens early on in the investigation. This is a published image following his conviction for the murder. I want you to compare these two images. The ear, hairline, facial hair, lips, eyes, eyebrows, head shape. Everything seems consistent, other than the ethnicity. We know that eyewitness accounts are inscribed with existing prejudices, biases, suppositions, presumptions. Could it be that the eyewitness got it right? To me, this resonates. I think at this point, we have enough to present our findings to Margaret's family.
How are you?
It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, too.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
One of our early objectives was to look at Margaret's case in the context of other crimes. We uncovered evidence of the sexual assault and murder of in Warden Woods Park. And there are a number of striking, compelling similarities, not only in MO, but in the signature. There are a number of compelling facts that suggest, in total, in aggregate, that may be responsible for Margaret's murder.
He was convicted of the murder of
That's right.
so he's in jail.
He's been paroled.
It's a day that I thought would never arrive. I just don't know how to feel about it, you know.
I've never met people that are more courageous than the two of you.
We were talking about submitting our report to the police and persuading them to reopen this file. That as of today, they've reopened it.
Oh, good, good. That's a relief.
The detective who's taken this on has left his contact information, and he wants to hear from you.
That's really good news, Mike. So
that is
thank you.
outstanding
Thank
news.
you.
I'm so happy.
Yeah, good.
My father was a tireless advocate for the law. He was a criminal prosecutor. Some say ruthless, others say righteous. Yeah, I'm cut from the same cloth. I can't really remember who I was before I became a cop. It's my job to make bad things happen to bad people.
What we feel now bridges the distance between bottomless grief and profound rage. He was my uncle, but he was also my friend. I urge the person who's responsible for this to come forward and give us some peace.
To be gay, it did have a certain amount of danger to it, that lifestyle at that time.
The building was full of people. It wasn't some random act. People knew more than they were saying.
Why would anybody do this? Why?
My brother was my dearest, dearest friend. He understood me. He adored my children.
The things that I think about that might have happened to my brother that day and that night, I think the biggest focus is his shock and pain and horror. I feel always the grief, and I grieve for what might have been.
Can you tell me a little bit about Dave as a brother?
He was my best friend. I could confide in him about anything or discuss anything. It's hard to believe this actually happened to such a wonderful person.
These are people that have had so much pain, so much loss, dealing with people that have lost someone through murder. How can you make it better? You can't.
If there's new information or something in the news, we wonder if maybe there's a connection between this case of my uncle's and another murder.
What we would like to do is to look further into the circumstances of how and why David was taken. We're looking for your blessing, your permission to allow us to undertake that journey, if you will, and bring you along.
Absolutely.
I've been a cop and a professor of criminology for years, and I've used that experience to assemble a squad of civilian subject matter experts. They must approach each case completely unbiased, to not box themselves into conventional thinking, to bring fresh eyes and new technologies to the table. Their job, and mine, is to investigate the coldest of cold cases, the murders that time forgot. David Buller, professor of fine arts at the University of Toronto, fourth homicide in the city of Toronto in 2001. David was openly gay and well known in the local gay community. Much respected by his students, who saw him as something of a luminary, an inspiration. David Buller was last seen approximately 1 p.m. on January 18th, 2001, entering an elevator here, the Connaught building on the main campus of the University of Toronto. In this building on that day, there was a retirement party on the main floor with at least 150 guests attending. David had a 6:30 p.m. lecture scheduled that same night. The class assembled in anticipation for the lecture. As usual, they were surprised to find that a typically punctual David Buller had not shown up. The next morning at 7 a.m., a faculty cleaning lady enters the office and finds David dead on the floor. Victim of multiple stab wounds, she promptly notifies the police.
I mean, the university you think of as a safe haven, and to have something so dramatic and awful take place there would just be horrifying.
Naturally, speculation arose as to who might have done this, who would be motivated to do such a thing, and take great risk in doing so. Are we dealing with a student? Are we dealing with an outsider?
David's sister mentioned to me that there's a student who's been bothering a number of the professors.
Are there any questions, first of all, with respect to the facts in this case?
Was the office a very bloody mess, like a real mess?
Yes.
As one would think, yes.
Was there a trail of blood leading out of his office?
There was no evidence of blood in the corridor or anywhere else outside the office.
And no footprints, though?
No.
In terms of the stabbing, Renee, the fact that he was stabbed 7 times and there were no indicators of blood trails, what could explain that?
It depends on, whether he was struggling or moving around after several wounds had been inflicted, or whether he had already been subdued somehow, knocked out, and then stabbed. So more information about the crime scene and about the condition of David's body when it was found will definitely be helpful.
Was he found face down on his back?
That should be amongst the coroner's notes.
How much of the building was cordoned off in the initial investigation?
The entire floor would have probably been the inner crime scene, and the building would have been sealed off.
If this was my uncle, I wouldn't stop until I turned every stone. I would search every avenue and try everything I could. There's a killer out there.
I want to hear fresh ideas about who's going to do what. Renee?
I'd like to contact the coroner to try and get a copy of the autopsy report.
Securing that autopsy report is going to be key. Antonella?
I want to see if I can get a psychological profile of David Buller's killer.
It's a place to start.
Knowing that there's a cold case here and that we have time pressure, it creates a little bit of anxiety, I would say, because we don't have a lot of time.
I'd like to visit the site.
So just to recreate the crime scene as it was.
Yeah.
Don't try to mimic what the police have done. Approach this with the resourcefulness that you have. It's going to require you staying on target. We talk about this as being another cold case. The reality is, I just met David's niece and his sister, and for them, this case has never been cold. They have remained vigilant in trying to find answers about what happened to David since the day he died. They're putting their trust in you to help them find those answers.
David's murder is particularly disturbing when I picture it in my mind's eye. 7 times someone stabbed him.
How could you have that much hatred towards another human being?
Where did the killer go? How did the killer get there? How did they move so stealthily through a building with at least 150 people, 1 floor down at a retirement party? To me, there's just more questions than answers. One of the main challenges for the squad in looking into David Buller's murder is the fact that in speaking with David's family and friends, he seems to have led a compartmentalized life. He had his life as an artist, his life as a professor, and his life as a gay man. The question then is, did the killer come from one of these many lives that David led? Or was this just a random act of extreme violence? I'm on my way to meet David's niece, Karen. Since 2001, she's been continuously pushing for answers in the murder of her uncle. It's my opinion that her insights on this case are essential to our new investigation. Do you think that the sort of sensationalist reportage around David's murder may have influenced the police investigation?
Yeah, I think it could have shaped the investigation early on. I think that the police were making assumptions based on the fact that David was gay, thinking, well, that person must have done something risky. That person must have put himself at risk. It seemed implausible that this could be a random crime, you know, and hate crimes so often are.
In any cold case investigation, family theories about what may or may not have happened are important. They help guide investigators. In David's case, we need to figure out whether or not this was a random act of violence, a hate crime, or what's known as a personal cause homicide, meaning someone acted in order to carry out a specific objective.
What makes sense in my mind is that the person who killed David was known to David, and that person was very familiar with the Connaught building and knew where to find David.
So I think we should go and check out every floor. Look at the hallways, the washrooms, exits, and entrance points. This is a great wee building.
The neo-Gothic architecture of One Spadina looks to me like something straight out of a horror flick. Knowing that a murder took place just adds to that creepy atmosphere. How badly do I want to see the inside of this building? Very. It's my hope that we're able to try to find this office for the first time. Just get a rough sense of how labyrinthine is the interior of this building. Locked. Let's see if this one's open.
1, 2, 3. So there's 3 floors. So there's the one entrance side. That was for deliveries, maybe? Another door there. So there's another door here.
This is an exit only, I guess. Oh, that's just great.
Asbestos removal in progress.
They're making interior modifications. So our initial idea of quickly running in there, getting a sense of the location, it's a little bit more complicated now.
To kill a man in his place of work in the middle of the day takes a certain kind of perpetrator. I'm meeting with Dr. Giorgio Lacqua to build a psychological profile of David Buller's killer. And given that he was murdered at his office versus his home, what can that tell us about the crime itself?
Let's say there's somebody you don't want to see anymore, you're this grand old friend or somebody you don't want to interact anymore, you will not let this person come into your house. But if it's a public building, the door is open, it probably would have been easier for this person to blend back in after committing such high emotional crime.
So this person is hiding in plain sight, as they would say.
That's, I think, what we're seeing here.
The person would have cleaned the scene. No DNA evidence was found. Would that have been done, I guess, immediately after the murder?
There's an explosion of emotionality and then a return to normality. At that point, the person recouped all his ability to think straight, and if there was anything that should be or could have been put in order, was done.
What about the choice of weapon, Giorgio? What can that tell us?
It's likely that there was some familiarity because the person was able to get very close to the personal space of the victim. If you want to kill somebody with a blade, you really have to be very close.
The use of a knife can reveal a lot about a perpetrator. The act itself was intimate and emotional. It tells us that the person that murdered David likely knew him.
Oh, I was a bit disappointed to see in going through David's autopsy report that where the injuries are supposed to be marked and charted, that the injuries weren't actually transcribed there.
Every medical examiner operates a little bit differently. Although the diagrams weren't used by the pathologist in David's case, he did provide detailed descriptions of each wound in terms of their location on the body, their depth, angle of entry, etc. I'm translating those descriptions into a visual representation and demonstrate visually the pattern of external stab wounds. It's really essential to view them in the context of the body so that we can determine the position of the victim relative to the perpetrator.
It looks like we have transversely orientated, complex gaping stab wound just above the nipple level, 6 stab wounds to the anterior chest and 1 to the left back.
So although there's only one wound, there are multiple tracks inside the body. We just can't see them. Wounds inflicted with a knife really are a dynamic event. To be able to see the angle of entry, the depth, it all comes together to build a picture of just how that interaction took place.
So we have a total of 4 abrasions associated with the stab wounds on the chest.
It seems as though we're looking for a weapon that will have a single blade, but the base of the handle where it connects would have had the ability to cause an abrasion at both ends. Understanding the sequence of blows and the position of David relative to the perpetrator when they were inflicted will really help us put together this picture of whether they're already in close proximity when the attack began and how it unfolded. Once we know what the internal track is like, then we'll be able to map more precisely what the position of the weapon was. So let's start with the first external wound.
Towards the sternum, it didn't pierce very deep. So we actually have 2 tracks originating from this surface wound.
Certainly the perpetrator used a lot of force, so perhaps their first blow was a hard one. The perpetrator delivered the blows in smooth, single action. He was able to penetrate the blade deep into David's body with really no resistance. Visualizing the arrangement of the stab wounds and realizing just how precisely they were placed makes me realize just how close the perpetrator had to get to David to inflict these wounds. He was likely standing right behind him.
Priority task for the squad at this point is determining how and why David Bullard was attacked at his office. I've deployed Peter and Daniel to go down to the university, have a closer look at the crime scene. Locked. We need to determine if David not only knew his killer, but if the killer knew the layout of this building.
The issue with access to One Spadina is the contractor has taken over the site. Sincerely, the Office of Space Management. The last possible physical record of David Bullard's case is in the process of being destroyed, and all I can do is walk by and kind of watch it day by day. I believe there have been conversations with a number of my staff. Insurances would not allow this. Unfortunately, this request is not possible due to a number of challenges. Unfortunately, not possible, not allowed it. Regards, University Planning, Design, and Construction. Hey, Mike. We just got back from One Spadina Crescent, and it turns out that it's actually closed for asbestos removal.
Until when?
Actually, this building is going to be undergoing a $50 million transformation until 2015.
All right, so I want you to continue to make efforts to get access. This is obviously, when we're under a tight timeline, not good news, right? Better news next time, right?
Fingers crossed. Not having access to the building is incredibly frustrating, especially because it's so pivotal in this investigation. We need to examine the crime scene to unravel and put together the pieces.
If we can't get physical access, the next best thing is going to be the blueprints for the building. I want to see those drawings and see them used in configuring a three-dimensional retroactive crime scene model.
Map all the paths away
Okay.
from David's office.
Right.
And see where that gets us.
Hoping to, first of all, get a feel for the culture and feel of the art faculty at the time. Hopefully, by speaking to students or faculty, I can try and tap into any rumors or gossip or just what people thought did happen. I got completely shut down at the university. Nobody would talk to me about this case, period. I've kind of hit brick walls. So I've decided I'm going to go and do what I do. I'm going to go out and canvass a few areas near the university. Try and find somebody who knew him, may have had a beef with him or know someone that had a beef with David. I believe it was someone that knew him, and I believe it was meticulously planned. I'm working on a case, David Buller.
I've spoken to him, but that's as far as it goes. I hope you solve it.
I've been shut down completely. It's almost like this academic administrative wall. I feel like I've let the squad down to some degree because that's my thing, is getting people to talk. I'm used to getting results, and I got nothing.
Better understanding David's relationship with his students may prove to be a critical piece of information in determining whether or not his murder was what we call a personal cause homicide. We heard rumors that David was dealing with a disgruntled student, but we can't get anyone at the university to speak with us. So I'm going to meet with David's sister, find out what exactly she knows. I wanted to just ask some follow-up questions with respect to some of the facts in issue. Did he talk to you at all in passing about his classes that term?
There was a certain amount of tension because there was a student at the school that had been threatening some of the professors, and he was one of them. Later, I learned that the student was walking around at the back of the class with a knife in his hand. He was tense.
This incident with the knife, was this in one of David's classes?
Yes.
Was he genuinely concerned for his safety?
Yes.
I know the police had an alibi for this angry student, but we need to go back. We need to have a second look at that same information again.
Even though I'm getting stonewalled everywhere I turn in this case, I just got to keep at it. Nose to the grindstone. Something's got to come out of it somehow. Hello. Oh, no, don't worry. It's cool. I'm not a cop. You might be able to help me, possibly. January 2001, at the Connaught Building, right here at Spadina Circle, Professor David Bullard, stabbed 7 times.
You know, Don is his student.
Oh, you know a student?
Yeah, Don is the professor's student.
Does she come here?
She will only Saturday afternoon here.
Thank you so much. I'll see you then. A bit of a breakthrough here. Arranging to meet with someone at 4 p.m. on Saturday that knew David at the time of the murder. Finally, something.
Based on scientific evidence and the civilian squad's own findings in consultation with experts, it appears very likely that David Buller knew his killer. We have conflicting information about the time of David's death. It turns out that he may have been threatened and even stalked during the final months and weeks of his life by someone known only as the angry student.
The student was walking around at the back of the class with a knife in his hand.
I need to get the squad on both of these new developments stat. All right, one of the names that keeps coming up, it's not necessarily a name as much as it is just a label, this angry student.
Discounted by police.
He was discounted by police.
I don't think that's any reason for us to discount him.
He was eliminated in 2001 because of his being captured on CCTV inside a bank with a timestamp that was deemed to be accurate that would put him far enough away from the location of David's murder at the time of David's death.
So Mike, if we know the time that he was at the bank, do we also have an exact time when he was murdered?
Renee, on the autopsy report?
The autopsy report didn't indicate how the postmortem interval was determined, so I have no confidence that that particular time that was on the report is accurate.
We already know that during the course of David's murder, during the struggle, the power cord for his computer was knocked from the wall. This created a time and date stamp on the computer's hard drive. Sometime between the final keystroke on that computer and when the power source was disconnected from the wall is when David died. And between those two events, both of which are recorded on the computer's hard drive, we have a fairly firm time of death. We're going to compare the CCTV footage and the timestamp on that to the timestamp on David's computer. And from there, we can figure out if there is enough time between that time of death and when this angry student was last seen on the CCTV footage to get from that bank to the university. The computer is our best eyewitness.
Here we are at the bank where this person of interest started on CCTV at 1:07 p.m. He left this bank, and the question is, does his alibi hold up? So I'm gonna start off my stopwatch, and we can head out now.
Okay, perfect. We're going to 1 Spadina Crescent, the Connaught Building.
This goes to Warden Station, right? Okay. If it takes longer than 1 hour and 22 minutes to get to 1 Spadina, then his alibi holds. We know that this student left that bank at 1:07.
Right.
And so that gives an hour and 22 minutes. There we go. So we've beaten that by a good amount. We just discovered that we cannot discount this student based on his CCTV time alone, because we can very easily travel, on a weekday afternoon from that bank to the building's front door in about 45 minutes, no problem.
I'm meeting a woman named Dawn, who was a student of David Buller's. What interested me about Dawn, first and foremost, is she was actually willing to speak to me, because we'd had a lot of problems on campus getting anyone who is a student or faculty member to speak to us whatsoever. Dawn, how did you know David?
I had him for a full year, first year art studio. He was very easy to be around, very helpful, very accessible if you needed anything.
Okay.
But he always had that professional distance.
Were there any rumors right off the hop about who may have done it?
Somebody off the street, maybe a crackhead somehow came in, got into the
Right.
office.
Any indication towards him dating or seeing students socially?
No, absolutely
romantically at all?
not.
Not at all, eh?
And I never saw anybody that could be like a friend or a lover or whatever come to see him at class.
Never,
either.
nothing like that?
No.
What about the other faculty members? As far as you know, did he get along with them, or was there any professional beefs or anything like that you ever heard of? Rumors of?
I wouldn't say they seemed exceptionally friendly with each other.
Well, we've been having a lot of trouble getting faculty and students to talk to us about this case.
Well, I would think if there's students that know something, that they might, like be afraid of a repercussion. And staff, I would think, they just want it to go away. It just looks bad.
In this case, for the students or staff not to want to say anything at all, there's got to be a compelling reason there. It makes you wonder, could the killer still be in the building?
They want it to go away, and I bet they want you to go away.
No question that David knew his killer, and the angry student is looking like a viable person of interest. In order to firm up his alibi and also establish a precise or near precise time of death, I'm going to have Peter conduct a forensic computer analysis of David's files. The end of activity on that computer should indicate the time of death and will also help us confirm whether or not the student had enough time to get from point A to point B and commit this murder.
The more I delve into the details, the more I'm struck by how the criminals managed to pull this off, how they're still out there, how there's no answers. Coming from physical sciences, I'm a fan of getting answers.
What's going on here? I see a kind of a retro desktop here.
Yeah.
What we got?
Well, here we have an iMac, very similar to what David would have used in his office. I talked with Lisa Sandloss. She tells me that his original machine has been disposed of. She was able to give me, though, these screenshots of the original forensic investigation. The reason I wanted to get my hands on this is this discrepancy in the times here. The last written time recorded on the file is 2:10 p.m., but the log contents themselves begin with the correct date and then 1:10 p.m.
What would account for the discrepancy, do you think?
Well, the only way I could explain this discrepancy would be to hypothesize that David was in the habit of leaving daylight saving time turned on. That advances the displayed time by 1 hour.
Because this 1 hour is important in terms of establishing time of death and firming up the quote-unquote angry student's alibi. Whether his computer was set to daylight standard time or daylight savings time, that 1 hour difference could change everything. We need to firm up when exactly that final keystroke was. That indicates roughly the time of death. The squad's been trying to track down former students of David's for weeks. Finally, Antonella has located a former student. The student is speaking to us on the condition that her identity remain a secret. Did David have more collegial relationships with other faculty?
I have to say no. I also detected some kind of political jousting going on right before the end because there has to be a head of department, and I felt like someone was putting David forward for that, and there were other people who disagreed with his politics.
Who interests you in terms of this case?
They really should be looking at faculty, and someone in particular.
Not only is Peter working on solving this time of death mystery, but he and Dania are using technology to grant us access to the building.
If we can't get in, we'll just rebuild the building virtually and see what we can glean from that model. So here we're following the point of view of someone unfamiliar with the building. Right? So they'd look back and forth, they'd have to navigate through these 150 people. I can't wait to see what the squad will do with this. Here we have the main entrance.
Where would David's office have been?
Here. So Renee, which side of the crescent was the crosswalk on?
We need to prove whether or not David's killer knew his way around the building, and more specifically, knew his way to David's actual office.
This is great that we've got the drawings.
Danny and I have some 3D models up on the smartboard.
All right, let's have a look.
Wanted to just have a look at those. taken these technical drawings and we've recreated three-dimensional models of the first and second floors.
Okay.
So what we're seeing here is the path of someone unfamiliar with the interior entering the building and encountering this crowd of 150 plus people.
These are the guests at the retirement party.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So here we ascend the main staircase and we try to make our way to David's office. Unfortunately for this assailant, he quickly gets lost in the labyrinthine passageways. And finally, this unfamiliar person happens upon David's office.
It's not an intuitive route to his office based on the animation scheme I'm seeing and where it's located. We've also examined numerous escape routes. Each one is more complicated than the next, especially given that David's office was located on the second floor.
In the next animation, we have a much more direct route. Here we're simulating what somebody familiar with this building might have done to get to David's office.
They know exactly where they're going.
And they make their way to the second floor.
Up the main staircase. So 2 rights, end of the hall.
And then there's David's office.
So that's what the route would look like. This strongly suggests premeditation or familiarity with the building.
You know, the middle of the daytime, with that many people in the building, to get in and out, very bold, calculating for certain. Someone who is clever.
Maybe the person was already in the building in the morning, had been there for a couple of hours.
The additional question is then the exit route.
Yes,
So
and we have that as well.
slide.
Excellent.
We're looking at the second floor here. The blue square is David's office.
Green are the elevators.
If you look at these possible exit routes, there is no blood transfer. We already know from examining the blueprints that there were bathrooms located near David's office, that there was art studios located nearby. Studios, like bathrooms, have sinks. This may in part explain why no trace evidence like blood was found near the murder scene. So you're talking about someone who not only was familiar going in, but then exiting was discreet enough and careful enough to not leave any transfer evidence anywhere along this entire expanse.
Somebody had time to perhaps change into different clothes.
I think Dania is bang on here. I think we're looking for someone who was already in the building. In fact, someone we could describe as belonging to the building. Someone who didn't have to run and hide, either before or after David's murder.
To be able to escape without leaving any evidence behind, no signs of blood spatter. There are some very deliberate steps that were taken by the perpetrator to cover their tracks.
All possible explanations lead back to Peter's hypothesis that we're talking about someone who knows the layout of the building and is a familiar user of the building.
Right from the beginning in this case, I was looking for answers. Finally getting some of those, it's an amazing feeling just to know that we can reconstruct what happened. So it feels great.
The more we look into this, the clearer things get. The placement of the wounds on David's body suggests he may have known his killer. The location of his office and the lack of any blood or transfer evidence in the corridor outside the office also suggests that the killer knew the layout of the building. So that, plus what our witness is telling us, suggests that we should be looking at someone within the building itself. It could be a spurned lover, could be someone from the faculty or staff. Peter and Dania threw their 3D model to simulate the killer's movements within the building. That builds a compelling case that David's murder was not a random act of violence. It would seem that it was in fact premeditated and likely committed by someone from within the university itself. That said, we don't have any concrete leads as to who this person was. At this point, it's key that we find someone who knows something and is willing to talk. Going to the art gallery to interview David's friend, Andrew Ward. Andrew.
Mike.
Nice meeting you. David's family describes you as one of his closest friends. So I guess my first question is, as someone who would be maybe a confidant of his, is this a suggestion that David led something of a double life? There is some misinformation about him floating around out there, whether it's
Well,
right
I think
or wrong.
there were people close to the police at the very beginning of the investigation that could have clouded David's personality.
Okay, how so?
You know, the police were always coming to me and asking me these ridiculous questions. And, well, you know, did David ever see any of his students?
Okay.
No. He knew there were lines you just didn't cross.
So some of the reports a late night tryst gone awry or something like that.
Fiction.
Around Christmas 2000, so just a few weeks before David's murder, he made some suggestion that he felt that he may be in danger. Did he ever come to you with concerns about this rogue student? Is the student someone of interest in this case?
No.
No, not at all. Okay.
No.
Why?
Well, I think it's all university related for sure. I think there are other people at the university that raised a lot of red flags.
Who are these people?
Well, and just before he was killed, he stated to me that he had problems with both these faculty members.
David's murder immediately gave rise to a number of theories among his friends and family, each of whom obviously has their own biased point of view. At this point in our investigative analysis, it's crucial that the squad not focus on theories or get hung up on conjecture and focus on cold, hard facts. All right, so we're at the end. So I'd just like to hear your final findings.
On that day, there was a field trip planned for students on the second floor, which is where David's office was.
So the second floor cleared out. That rules out anyone interrupting the killer. Yeah, that can't be deemed a coincidence. It's a fascinating find, so thanks for that. Renee?
I did have an opportunity to review crime scene photographs, and combined with the results of my experiment, confirm that David was likely stabbed from behind. That was likely the first blow. I've learned really to control the emotional response to what are otherwise very visceral and dramatic scenes. The ultimate goal of all of my analysis is to provide some answers for the family. The perpetrator was likely standing directly behind him, and my best guess is that they were looking at the computer screen together when he was surprised by the wound to his back, the momentum of which likely tipped him backwards.
So this is someone he trusted enough to not only get that close, but turn his back to. Peter?
So I put a lot of time into resolving the one-time discrepancy that I found in these reports. And the computer was set to Eastern Standard Time, putting the last action recorded on the computer at 2:25 p.m. When I examined David's computer logs further, I discovered that he continued to work until approximately 2:25 p.m., giving the angry student plenty of time to leave the bank at 1:07 p.m. and make the 45-minute journey to David's office.
These findings are compelling, and I think we've got enough here to put together a final report, and I'm prepared to deliver those findings to David's family. We've hit a brick wall with our own investigation, so it's crucial that we share all of our findings with the police as well as the family. David's murder does fit within the model of what we call personal cause homicide. One of the people you all mentioned early on during the course of my meeting with you was this angry student.
Yes.
And no one was really satisfied that he could be excluded in terms of opportunity. There was sufficient time from his being on the CCTV image at the bank to when we now know David was murdered. We know that he withdrew or was in the process of already withdrawing from the university at the time, and that he left the country shortly thereafter. However, we spoke with several students, but I can tell you, people are very afraid. Their fear and reluctance suggests that there is still someone who wields some degree of power, such that they are deterred from saying anything. There is compelling evidence. This person was familiar with the building, somebody with direct access and knowledge of David's whereabouts and routine. The methodology we use and
The rationale behind what we're doing is your best suspects are the ones left standing once other people are excluded. In brief, there's a strong possibility that it was a faculty member in the arts department at the university in 2001 who was David's killer.
I just feel a tremendous sense of relief.
Yeah, I do too.
And I feel very emotional right now because this is what we've wanted, was this kind of exhaustive search. If your theory is true, he didn't die because he was gay. And that is a big deal to me. And he could have. That could have been the answer, but we should have been looking at everything more closely. Thank you. Thank you very much.
My father was a tireless advocate for the law. He was a criminal prosecutor. Some say ruthless, others say righteous. Yeah, I'm cut from the same cloth. I can't really remember who I was before I became a cop. It's my job to make bad things happen to bad people.
She did not want to go to work that night. He did not walk the streets at night. We all knew as soon as Jackie didn't come home that something was wrong. The overpass was Jackie's last walk. Jackie deserves that someone be held accountable for this. Every time I come here, I recall Jackie's last walk. My mother was devastated. All that she wanted to do was look for Jackie's killer. We would follow any tips. We kept hoping and looking. Someone decided to end Jackie's life and take her away from us.
How has it been for you, this experience, losing Jackie?
I've lost other people in my life from illnesses, old age, and you can intellectually process it while you're grieving. In Jackie's case, you can't. The grieving has been done, but there are no answers.
Having something hanging for so many years and not knowing the answer, I would think it wears you down a bit because you've lost something so precious so early.
I don't know if there's such a thing as closure, but I know for me that I would rather know who's responsible than live all my life not trying to find answers. When I met with police last year, I had 3 requests, one of them being if Jackie's diary could be returned to us. That's the only thing I have, and I'm willing to offer it if that would help.
It will help. We will take that. Thank you. The exhibit tag shows 1969, October 4th, at 15 minutes after 10 o'clock p.m. That may have been the last time it was looked at. Having the diary in my hand as an artifact of Jackie's short life hammers home the importance of what we're doing here. With your blessing, we would like to bring this case back into the light.
I believe it is solvable.
Being from London, I always knew about this case. Everyone here has a personal connection to this case and should be angered that it's still open. I've been a cop and a professor of criminology for years, and have used that experience to assemble a squad of civilian subject matter experts. They must approach each case completely unbiased, to not box themselves into conventional thinking, to bring fresh eyes and new technologies to the table. Their job, and mine, is to investigate the coldest of cold cases, the murders that time forgot. Jacqueline English, case number 69-52, the 52nd murder in the province in 1969. October 4th, 1969, approximately 5 p.m. Jacqueline, or Jackie as she was known, attends her place of work here. The Metropolitan store located in the Treasure Island Plaza was then a rural area outside the City of London. Jackie was a waitress at the Metropolitan store. 10:15 p.m., Jackie is seen leaving the store, walking over the overpass on Wellington Road. Two witnesses describe Jackie as getting into a 4-door sedan. That's the last time Jackie is seen alive. 4 days later, the nude body of Jackie English is discovered floating in the water of the Big Otter Creek near the town of Tilsonburg, almost an hour outside the City of London. No clothing on the body, even her earrings had been removed. It's determined that Jackie died from a single severe blow to the head.
Young girls like Jacqueline, to have her life cut short in such a violent and atrocious manner, it's horrifying.
I have a 14-year-old daughter. Just disturbing as a parent, it's evil.
The fact that it was so long ago and it hasn't been resolved, and the fact that only Anne is left, a sister, the length of the not knowing, it's tragic.
A number of Jackie's belongings, including torn pieces of her clothing, are found approximately 10 miles from where the body was dumped. A pair of brown penny loafers she was seen wearing as she was walking home were found 10 miles from where the other clothing was discarded. A witness comes forward, a woman named Betty Harrison. She tells the police she saw Jackie speaking with a customer inside the Metropolitan store, a man she describes as having made Jackie look uneasy. She provides police with a description that allows them to create this composite drawing. Ms. Harrison begins to receive threatening phone calls, telling her she should not have gone to the police. In subsequent days, she receives a sympathy card in the mail. The only inscription on the card is the statement, "We will be watching you."
It also indicates to me that the perpetrator, they're very connected to the media. There seems to be almost an aspect of performance.
Absolutely. About a month later, Ms. Harrison is ambushed by a man with a knife and confined in her car while he cuts her face upwards of 27 times.
The attack on Mrs. Harrison seems very theatrical. If her attacker was legitimately concerned with being connected to Jackie's murder, why wouldn't he just kill her? Was Ms. Harrison able to describe her attacker, and did it match the composite?
Not very well. It was dark, and given the brutality of the attack, she didn't get a good look.
This Miss Harrison is still alive and willing to talk to us.
She's dead.
She's dead. It would have been very helpful to be able to speak to somebody who saw something at the time.
So far, the squad is asking all the right questions. They're looking for a way into this case, and that's exactly what I want to see from them. Other questions that connect to the evidence.
Was Jackie sexually assaulted?
No obvious sign of sexual assault other than her body being stripped nude, her clothes being found torn.
No defensive wounds?
No defensive wounds. Her boyfriend at the time voluntarily provided a blood sample for comparison to the DNA at the scene because it was thought that the sample may have been from when they had consensual sex earlier on the 4th.
What was the boyfriend doing on the night of the 4th?
In the notes that I've received, and I'll share with you. There's a detailed statement taken from the boyfriend. He has an alibi.
Okay.
It's just weird that there wasn't necessarily a lot of trauma to her body, but the person who was threatened afterwards with the knife, there was substantial violence.
So is it the same person? Is it a copycat? We know that there's a number of unsolved sex slayings in London at the time.
Mike and I met with the sister who had mentioned that this person named Marilyn Hurd, a friend of Jackie's. After Jackie died, Marilyn tried to commit suicide. Marilyn had a picture of Jackie, and on the back of this picture, it said, "The name of the killer will remain with me."
Antonella's revelation raises a lot of questions for me about Marilyn, who she is, and what else she knows about the circumstances about Jackie's death.
It could be huge. It could break the case if we can get her to come clean and talk to us.
What do you want to do with this?
I'd like to go to where the body was dumped. I think it'd be useful to map all of the different locations, because if we have the point where she was abducted, where the body and other clothing was dumped, it might give us a useful radius to start plotting persons of interest.
I like where you're going with that. Geographic profiling is key in this case. Peter?
I'd like to get a look at as much archival data as possible and map it.
Maybe pair up with someone who then can look at similar cases.
Mike, you mentioned that there's a lot of sex slayings in London, so I'd be interested in looking into those cases, public forums, that kind of thing.
Antonella?
I want to look at the diary, first of all. I want to see what's in the diary. I want to see what she thought, what she did.
Monty?
Marilyn, you'd have to go and try and talk to Marilyn.
Find her. There's still an element of danger to this case. Be mindful of who we're dealing with here. Stay vigilant. All right, let's go. Jackie's murder is a very complicated case, and it will push this squad to its limits. Not only do we have to unearth old facts, we need to uncover new information.
40 years is a long time for a case to be cold. I don't know whether or not Marilyn Hurd is alive, but somebody has to remember her.
Jackie English was last seen alive on the night of October 4th, 1969, when she was on her way home from work. Her body was discovered in a creek days later, over 40 miles from where she was last seen. Her clothes and shoes were then found miles from where her body was located. I need Antonella to look at our victim. I need her to help us understand who Jackie was. Why is it that she got in the car that night? Who was driving? Was it someone she knew, someone from her inner circle, a friend and acquaintance, or someone from an outer perimeter, someone who had seen her before, and when they saw her walking that overpass, saw an opportunity and took it?
I came in this evening to really focus on reading Jackie's diary. I'm interested to see what Jackie was thinking at the time, what was going on in her life. There are thoughts, there are reflections that she's experiencing. I want to get to that. As a psychotherapist, you have to read more than what's actually there. After reading the diary several times, I noticed that there could be some code embedded in the text. Cracking this code might be key in helping us in this investigation.
I've just got a call about some files and some personal diaries that belong to a detective who worked this case in the late 60s. I'm hoping that there's something buried in those files that will light a fire under this case. Dennis.
Oh, Mike,
nice to meet you.
I found some interesting information. My father passed away, and he was a detective sergeant in this area. They spent a lot of time on this Jackie English case. And there's the diaries. I also found in his basement some files. And you see these diaries. They tell what he did and who he met. Jackie English bothered him all his life, because it never did come to resolution.
This is a great gift. This is really remarkable. I've never seen anything like this. This original detective was so focused, so haunted by this case, that he duplicated all of his notes and then made secondary copies of some of his key files, boxed them up, and He kept them as a time capsule in his house. One day, he hoped that someone could carry on his work, that new technology would provide new momentum for his hunches that he could never follow up on, and that no one would listen to him about. I just found something interesting in the notes from the original investigation. It turns out that Jackie's coworker, Marilyn Hurd, who attempted suicide in the days after Jackie's death, changed her version of events about what happened that October night, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Hi, Ann, it's Mike. I'd like to come talk to you. I'm just following up on some new information. It's about somebody you know. One of the nagging questions in this case is the behavior of Marilyn Hurd. What is the secret, do you think, that she has?
I think Marilyn knows exactly what happened to Jackie. Marilyn has directed everybody in a million different ways, but Marilyn always was saving the ending for another day. Marilyn's mind has covered it up, or she's deliberately not sharing that with us.
Your sister's murder touched off this behavior?
Yes.
This botched suicide attempt.
I believe Marilyn holds the key, and something happened the Friday night. He's related. He was starting his career as a criminal very early on.
Do you know if he was out of jail at the time of Jackie's murder?
I have no idea if in jail or free.
We may be looking at someone who's fallen between the cracks.
We need to look further into Marilyn's relative, specifically his criminal background.
If this is the person that Marilyn is protecting. The best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. So I want to know what he was up to at the time and whether or not he would have had motive and opportunity to abduct and murder Jackie.
Right now, I'm up to trying to find Marilyn Hurd, but I haven't had any luck looking for her on the computer, so I'm gonna go old school. She's not listed in any current listing, but maybe a few years ago or 10 years ago, she had an address. There's definitely some phone numbers here for me to look into. If Marilyn Hurd is alive and in London, I'll find her.
The squad is investigating the murder of Jackie English, who was murdered on her way home from her part-time job in October 1969. Suffice it to say, after 40 years, the trail is very cold. Antonella is looking through Jackie's old diary to see if there's something in there that can help the squad out.
I noticed that there could be some code embedded in the text.
In addition to that, Peter and Renee are conducting a geoprofiling experiment, looking at other cases that may be related to Jackie's.
Geographic profiling is a way of taking into account multiple crimes in a crime series, and we're applying Rosmo's formula to the case of Jackie English because we have multiple data points to work with here. Rosmo's formula is a mathematical equation designed to find the most likely residence of a serial killer based on his crimes.
Rosmo's formula is currently the gold standard in terms of geoprofiling. It helped net Canada's worst serial killer, Robert Pickton, developed by an academic police officer like me.
I started my geographic profile with only one point, Jackie English's home at the time when she was killed.
The distance between the Metropolitan Store, the highway, and London city limit remain unchanged, and those variables will all be important factors to incorporate into the geographic profile that Peter's constructing. Right now, we're at the site where Jackie's body was discovered in Big Otter Creek, and I'm interested in examining the landscape around the bridge and around the creek where she was found to see what other options the perpetrator may have had for disposing of her body. I find it hard to believe that if the body were dropped from this height into water that shallow, they wouldn't show any signs of scraping the bottom. We can't assume that she was actually dropped from the bridge. Perhaps her body was carried down the bank and placed in the creek itself, which means that there could be some added significance to this body of water.
Renee's confirmed the locations where Jackie was last seen alive and where Jackie's body was found. Renee's emailed me these coordinates, and I'm going to put them into my geographic profile and start to build a more complete picture. Dania's been researching murders that have occurred in and around the area where Jackie was killed. Once I get those details, I'll be able to put it all together and see if a pattern emerges indicating where the killer might have lived.
I'm intrigued why the perpetrator would have selected the bridge itself as a location to dispose of her body. It's a very conspicuous spot. It would indicate to me that the perpetrator wants the victim to be found.
When I was reading through Jackie English's diary, I discovered that certain parts of it were written in some sort of secret code. Those are the encryptions that were in the diary. Do you think you can do anything with those? I could really use Monty and Peter's help to help me crack it.
This E's got to represent either an I or an A, because those are the only two words in the English language that can be in a sentence and just be one letter.
We've got some double letters too, right? Like the double B at the beginning of the word.
What can that be? Llama?
Yeah.
Like what other word in the English language begins with a double letter? I can't think of one other than llama.
And we have is likely a substitution cipher, which means that every letter has been replaced by exactly one other letter, and that this scheme doesn't change or evolve.
If E equals I, let's say that's the case. If we go 1, 2, 3, 4.
Once we figure out what scheme Jackie used to encode this text, we can then proceed character by character.
Okay, I got it. 1, 2, B equals L. 1, 2 in. If J equals D, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You follow?
Yeah, I think you got it. Yeah, so we've got Lloyd. Well, the name Lloyd fits that template.
When I checked into Jackie's background, I found out she had a boyfriend named David. When I checked into his background, I found out he had a brother named Rick, and Rick's middle name is Lloyd.
What's V gonna be?
R, right?
R. French. She missed a letter. Lloyd French kissed me.
Lloyd French kissed me?
Yeah. There's one down here as well. F. M was A, right?
Mm-hmm. I faked tears.
I faked tears.
That's what I got.
There's only 2 instances of that encryption, which for some reason she wanted to keep these 2 secret. Yeah. Lloyd French kissed me? This is unsettling. French kisses and fake tears? Who is this Lloyd? And could he somehow be connected to Jackie's murder?
Contained in the original file for Jackie English is a letter dating to 1978, 9 years after she was murdered. It's written by the brother of Jackie's boyfriend at the time of her murder. In this letter, Rick is seeking Dave's forgiveness for something horrible that he's done. The writer will not mention the event. Substitution words he uses include the burden, the sin, my sin. What he's referring to, I don't know. Could the brother, Rick, have had something to do with Jackie's murder? That's the question. The squad has been pushing hard to find the person or persons responsible for the murder of Jackie English. This is a group of civilians. Detective work is not in their usual wheelhouse. That said, so far I'm impressed with what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. It's imperative that we track down Jackie's co-worker, Marilyn Hurd, and look closer at her relative. I've been digging through some old police files, and I found an interesting letter between Jackie's boyfriend at the time and his brother. The content of that letter is strange, and it may have something to do with her murder. I'm recruiting the assistance of Dr. John Olson from the UK, arguably the world expert when it comes to forensic linguistics. He's been used by detectives all over Europe in cases where they need to analyze suicide letters, ransom letters, or confessions. In this case, I want him to get to the bottom of this concealed sin that's being referred to in this letter between the two brothers. If you'd just like to give me your take on the letter as it was given to you.
One of the first things that I look at when I look at a document of this nature is to see whether I can somehow get a picture of the relationship between the writer and the receiver.
I've removed the date, I've removed any reference to any specific person by name or by relationship, so he's looking at a blinded document.
Upon reading this, it is clear that any relationship between the writer and the receiver of these documents goes back a very long way. But yet, there is no love lost between us. That made me think of siblings, that we are dealing with siblings.
What, in your expert opinion, is it that the writer is talking about?
I think the word sinfulness really gives us the clue. It strongly suggests to me a sexual incident. The very fact that it's never made overt, this is a very common strategy used by people when talking about incidents of which they feel some kind of shame. You know, there is a certain crypticness about it. This may be because the writer, it's just occurred to me, was perhaps in prison at the time, but even so, there is no indication here of a third party. This seems to be very much a matter, because of the intensity of it, between the writer and the receiver.
In your experience, is this thing that the writer is referring to a cryptic admission to a murder, in your opinion?
No, absolutely not. I think this is a private shame that we're dealing with rather than a public crime.
Dr. Olson, in analyzing this letter and knowing nothing else about this case, is satisfied that it's correspondence between two siblings and that it's in reference to some sexual incident and that it's not a confession to murder. In combing through the original lead detective's personal diaries and journals, I've noted that her boyfriend at the time, David, had an alibi and was immediately excluded as a suspect. That said, his brother Rick has some significant involvement with the law. In looking at what he's done, nothing comes close to the very specific MO and signature that we see in Jackie's murder. It's time we move on and explore other possibilities.
When Mike talked to Jackie's sister Anne, he found out that Marilyn Heard's relative had some run-ins with the law. So I'm checking crime sites, social media sites, and any other records to see what I can come up with. See if there's any buzz about this guy still out there.
Dania has found some compelling information about Marilyn's relative that might prove key in moving this case forward. We have uncovered a very interesting development. Of course, we all know Marilyn Heard, whose botched suicide attempt in the weeks after Jackie's murder revealed that she had a photograph of Jackie in her pocket with some sort of cryptic, ominous message that she would take the secret of the killer to her grave. And who is it that Marilyn would be so willing to protect? And it turns out that Marilyn has a relative. And in he stabbed and slashed a boy playing on a lawn. He was later arrested, charged, and convicted in this attack. He was paroled or on full release just before Jackie's murder. We need to determine whether he and Jackie ever made acquaintance. I was also able to obtain a high school class photograph. This is him here. Did he also slash Betty Harrison, the witness who provided police with that composite description? If so, is he also more directly connected to Jackie's murder? So we're going to need to tighten this up. Renee, I want you to look further into what happened. And I want you to track down an expert in facial recognition who can overlay and compare this image from to the 1969 composite drawing. These are important finds with limited time remaining. Let's get at it. The missing piece of the puzzle continues to be Marilyn Heard. Whatever it is she knows or thinks she knows is key here, so finding her is imperative.
Residential.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Mike. Yeah, it's Monty. How are you? Yeah, I found Marilyn Hurd. In London. I'll email it to you right now.
Finally, this is our opportunity to find out if Marilyn Hurd really knows something. Is she protecting her relative?
I know who they are.
Who are they? The squad is looking to help solve the 1969 murder of Jackie English. She was last seen getting into a car and then vanishing into the night.
We already have one suspect. She had a relative who, just prior to Jackie's murder, was convicted of a serious assault.
Seems as though she may be protecting him. Tell me how you knew Jackie.
We started working together at the Metropolitan store. We had to walk over the 401 overpass to get to the closest city bus stop.
Okay. I knew that if I was aggressive in my questioning, that she would probably shut down, the same as she did with Anne English. Now, what do you remember about the night she went missing?
I wasn't with her the night she went missing, but she gave me a call sometime after 1 o'clock in the afternoon to ask me if I would go with these two men that she knew. I said I wouldn't, and I warned her about going with them. I know who they are.
Who are they?
I can't.
In the weeks after Jackie's murder, a security guard downtown found you with a photo in your pocket of Jackie.
I took an overdose myself.
But you were found with Jackie's photo in your pocket, and there was an inscription on the back stating something like,
I knew who killed Jackie English.
And you take it to your grave. Who's that?
I was a big confidant back there. I never broke a secret. If someone told me something and asked me not to tell anybody, I wouldn't tell anybody.
It's always frustrating when a witness clams up and won't fork over the information needed to help break a case open. Sometimes it's because they're genuinely afraid. Sometimes it's because they think they're being loyal to some confidant. It's important that I find another method of discovering who exactly she's protecting.
Did your relative know Jackie?
Not very well.
Had they met before?
I don't know.
Did he ever come to visit you at the store? Might he
No.
have? No? 19 stabbed a small child. Let's just cut
No,
to the chase.
that stabbed a small child.
Okay.
And I went to the jail and asked him why he was taking the
rap?
The rap, and he said he didn't think would survive delinquency school.
So when got out in 1969?
Okay, he got into trouble again apparently,
Right.
and armed robbery. But I knew could never do that.
So let me get this straight. He didn't stab the child. Somebody else did. And this armed robbery, he didn't do that either.
No.
But he took the rap for both.
He did.
Okay.
I've only ever told the truth as I remember it.
Do you still keep in touch with him?
No, I don't know where he's living or anything. I was too drugged up on psychiatric medication to keep tabs on him.
Over 40 years later, Marilyn Hurd is still protecting the identity of whoever it is she thinks killed Jackie English. The question is this an elaborate game she's playing, or has the trauma of Jackie's murder actually twisted her own memories to the point where she actually believes everything that she's saying and thinking? I'm also curious who they are. She keeps referring to them as they. Does this include Marilyn's relative and one or two or more other people, or different people entirely? We need to focus on cold hard facts and move this case forward, not conjecture or guesswork or what Marilyn Hurd thinks she may know.
Renee and I have been working on a geographic profile for Jackie, plotting locations where she was last seen, where her body was discovered, and where her clothing was found. Meanwhile, Dania's been looking into similar crimes with comparable signatures to combine into our geographic profile. Our hope is that by cross-referencing all locations, we are able to pinpoint where the killer most likely lived.
So I sent you guys the spreadsheet on the London sex slings. Is there anything that you guys found in terms of patterns or commonalities?
There was one case,
right?
It occurred in 19... If you guys want to take a look at... The case bears some remarkable similarities to Jackie. So was last seen getting into a car. Her body, her clothes, and her shoes were all found scattered widely.
Wow.
And the most obvious similarity is that evidence from the case was found near the same gravel pit where Jackie's shoes were left.
The MO, the age, and circumstances.
Many
how the victim was-
commonalities between these two cases.
Yeah.
And even though it was solved, the conviction didn't occur until 1970. So the timeline also fits for Jackie's case.
Jackie was 69, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Are they still in jail? Were they free? It's kind of like an adrenaline rush, just realizing those connections.
What's this guy's name?
David.
Renee's find with respect to this David character.
I mean, this is really what this initiative is about. This is what open source investigations ideally yield, which is
a match between where Jackie's shoes were dumped and where David's victim was also dumped.
That can't be dismissed as a coincidence. Peter, how'd you make out with Rossmo's formula in your geographic profile?
Pretty well. So let me just throw this up on the smartboard here. Rossmo's formula is a mathematical equation designed to determine where a serial killer lives. If we assume that one serial killer was responsible for Jackie's murder as well as the other murders in the same place and time that we've discovered, then Rossmo's formula allows us to pool the locations of these multiple murders and more accurately determine where the serial killer lives.
So we've got place last seen for Jacqueline English, the various locations where her clothing was found, where her body was located. We've got the location of the attack on witness Betty Harrison. We've got home address at the time. All of this seems to be surrounding this red center. Explain the significance of that.
So here, overlaid on a map of London and surrounding towns, is the most likely location of who killed Jackie English. The highest probability is marked by this red oval. And this red oval is centered on the town of Ontario.
David lived in the same town, and the formula indicates that in the Jackie English case, that town is the most likely home base for the killer. So we're going to need to tighten this up. We've still got a lot of work to do. We still need to determine if we should be looking at Ireland's relative as potentially being involved in Jackie's murder. But it's also important to take a hard look at this David, find out what involvement he might have had. It's time to start nailing this case down. This civilian squad has done a fantastic job unearthing new information about the unsolved murder of Jackie English. Already at this point in our investigation, we have several persons of interest.
As it turns out, Jackie's co-worker, Marilyn Hurd, had a relative who was convicted of a serious assault just prior to Jackie's murder.
But it's also important to take a hard look at this David fellow, find out what he was up to, find out what involvement he might have had. Thus far, the information is pretty compelling.
And this red oval is centered on the town of Ontario.
That town is the most likely home base for the killer. It's time to start nailing this case down.
Right now, we have 2 persons of interest in this case. We also have a composite drawing of someone that a witness saw Jackie talking to the night she went missing. So I'm at Brock University to meet with a researcher who specializes in facial perception. I'm hoping to see whether the composite drawing resembles either of our persons of interest.
The problem with his face, as you can see, is that it's incredibly grainy. And so that makes it quite difficult to find some of the edges.
This is a picture of David.
David's image is quite good. He's looking straight ahead.
So can you perhaps explain to me how you're going to compare these images to each other?
I'll try to identify ways in which this composite is distinctive by comparing them to an average face. This is the Caucasian average. So we'll find out how it differs. Then what we'll do is we'll do some measurements on David's face and on face and see whether they differ in the same way or the opposite way. Now, if we look at he only shares distinctive features in 2 ways. What's really interesting about his face is his forehead is particularly large. It's so much larger than average that I would consider that to be a fairly important difference. You can see that David does have a small forehead, and if we go from the brow to the middle of the lips, it's also larger. So in other words, just like the composite, the middle of his face seems to be relatively large. He seems to have a smallish chin. Where I have little green check marks, that indicates that he differs from the average face in the same way as that composite drawing. David has 4 green check marks compared to having only 2, which means David is more similar to the composite. It's not a positive ID, but it's saying it could be.
We just have to be careful to what extent we take these results, because the sketch was not necessarily Jackie's murderer.
I've worked a lot of weird cases in my day. Jackie English's case is probably the most twisted I've ever encountered personally. So who are we left with? Renee, I'm gonna go to you first.
Well, I went to Brock University to meet with Dr. Kathy Mondlock. She was able to establish that the sketch could be of David, and it is less likely to be that of our other person of interest, but it doesn't mean that David is the person who was the basis for the sketch.
Peter, I'm gonna come to you with respect to the forensic geographic profile.
And reran it to see, without any prior assumptions of who killed Jackie, what does the geographic profile algorithm tell us? And sure enough, like before, lights right up. And the geographic profile prioritizes David over all our persons of interest.
Along with Peter's geographic profile, we know from news reports from that period that this David character was convicted of dumping his victim's body just north of his hometown. 3 years later, Jackie English's penny loafers turn up just a few meters away. This is not a coincidence. Dania, with respect to our second person of interest, what were you able to find out?
He was convicted and sentenced to prison for 3 years. In 1970, a year after Jackie's murder, he abducted, attacked, and confined a female in her car. She did escape by rolling out of the moving vehicle.
Eerily similar in MO to what happened in Jackie's case. And the question is, what happened to him after that?
We were able to confirm that this person is currently living in Scotland. However, we don't know exactly where he is. Searching for him, doing whatever I possibly could, I could not get anything.
Marilyn's relative is a ghost.
Monty?
Well, David was not a ghost. I found him. He was fully paroled and released from prison in 1980 after serving 10 years for non-capital murder. He's moved around quite a bit over the last 40 years, but he's out there.
In 6 weeks, given the age of this case, we've made remarkable progress to narrow down our list of suspects. Without ruling out the second person, we need to prioritize David as the prime suspect. The squad can take this case no further, and the police have received a copy of our research and analysis. We identified 5 people of interest in this investigation, and we're now down to 2. One is Marilyn's relative.
Yes.
And the second is a person named David. Let's talk about Marilyn's relative first.
Okay.
You said Jackie would never get in a car with someone she didn't know.
Yes.
They had met at least once or twice.
Yes.
So Jackie would presumably get in the car with him. In 1970, he abducted another woman and held her in a car by her throat until she jumped out of a moving car and escaped with her life. He was then jailed for 3 years and has since moved to Scotland. You can't rule out his earlier behavior, his predictors, as being, good indicators of what he was capable of. So the next thing we did was we conducted what's called a geographic profile. It was deemed highly accurate in terms of pinpointing an offender's probable home base. Our geographic profile of all places in the world points to Ontario. In 1960, David lived in. In 1960, he had already killed. This can't be dismissed as a coincidence. No. Statistically, all of these factors in total point to him slightly more than Marilyn's relative. Again, we can't rule out either one.
Is he still in jail?
He's not.
Oh.
But we know where he is. The fact he is alive and out there will put this case very much back into the public interest.
We left no stone unturned. We did everything we possibly could.
I'm just finally happy that we have a suspect. I was apprehensive before coming in, but now I'm excited because it is an opening to an answer. life is cruel because the older you get, the more you tend to miss someone because you realize you should have a sister or you should have nieces and nephews. She should have been here. She should have been part of our lives.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Mike, very much.
Our pleasure.
Thank you, Antonio.